for you guys tonight, but for you personally, it's a great performance. And you hear the cheers here tonight. You love these fans, don't you?
It's awesome. I love playing here. I love this rink. It was a great win by us tonight.
Easily my favorite moment of the season, alongside Alex Ferrario. Normally, that's Tanner Hendrickson, who's filling in for Alex today. Alex a little bit under the weather. He's hoping to be back with us tomorrow. Grant Francis running the board for us this morning. I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. That audio courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest. Also the calls via your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Jordan Kyrou. Huge response, absolutely massive response on Saturday night. You can't ask for much better than that. 9 shots on goal, that ties a career high. 3 points ties a season high. A +3 on the ice at 5-on-5 ties a career best. 25 total shifts in the game. They were trusting him to go out there because of course you do. When he's playing that way, you got to get him out on the ice as much as possible. That is a new season high for him as well. It was the best game of the season for Jordan Kyrou, and the timing of this is not coincidental. Guys, we were wondering, what's the response going to be like? We all said on Friday, hey, this is a fork-in-the-road moment for Jordan Kyrou's career here in St. Louis. Which direction is it going to go? Because it could go in multiple different ways from here. It could totally go sideways. And either he ends up pouting and being disappointed by the way that the fan base treated him and thinking that he was the victim in all of this, or he picks himself up, he figures this thing out, his teammates rally around him, and he gets back to the player that he was offensively from a year ago while also maintaining the responsibility that we've seen from him so far this year. And he can be a top-line player for the Blues once again, where he is more than worthy of the $8 million salary that he gets. It's one game. We need to see a lot more than this. But all we have right now is the information that took place in that one game, and it was an A+ response by Jordan Kyrou, and an A+ response by all of you guys as well that were out there at Enterprise Center over the weekend. That is the way that you embrace a guy who had a tough moment. You held him accountable for it. He held himself accountable afterwards, and then everybody responded the right way on Saturday. You couldn't ask for anything more than that.
Yeah, great reaction from the fan base to Jordan Kyrou, and just an incredible response from Jordan Kyrou, because if he does not go out there and he does not perform and it is a tough night offensively and he's out there and he's like a -3 and the Blues lose that game, you really start to question what the path. You think he starts to go down that wrong path where it is, oh boy, he's really going to either pout about it or he's lost all his confidence because he's been booed. And instead he shows up, plays the best game of the season, and looked at, as Bannister said, a superstar out on the ice. He was awesome. I mean, he created chances. He was a part of a line that was the best line on the ice by far for the St. Louis Blues. And you saw that the difference-making ability that he has and why he got the contract and what the Blues hope that he can mold into, not just for a game, but can do sustainably for 82 games in a season and be a difference maker. He was awesome on Saturday night against the Dallas Stars.
Grant, you worked the boards for Alex Ferrario on pre- and post-game intermissions. What did you see from Jordan Kyrou that stuck out to you on Saturday?
Yeah, that game on Tuesday, too, he did finish a +3 in that one, too, against Ottawa. So he didn't have his best game in that game because obviously there was a lot of outside noise going on. But I thought Jordan Kyrou has handled this situation in a really mature way. I think that he hasn't let it affect his on-ice product too much. He hasn't been a liability like we've seen in the past. And his teammates are rallying around him, and he's feeding off of it. You look at that goal that Pavel Buchnevich scored against Ottawa, and as soon as he scored it, it was all about Kyrou, and they were hyping him up. And obviously that was a tough game for him. But then the next game, his teammates are doing the same thing. Like when he scored that goal, that breakaway goal, Alex was saying it on the broadcast, it looked like the entire bench, each of them just scored themselves. They were celebrating so hard. I think this was a chance for the team to rally around him and boost his confidence, and I think you're seeing that. And so moving forward for Kyrou, I think this can be a real confidence builder for him. And that's really all he needed. How many times this season have we said he's just not a confident player right now? Like, he has the skill. We all know he has the skill to put up major numbers in the NHL. We haven't seen his defensive game couple with that yet. The only time he's put up really big numbers has been when his defensive side of the game struggles. Right. So he's figured out the defensive side a little bit. He's not perfect, obviously, but he's gotten better. You can't deny that. He's a -4 right now. He was like a -18 at this time last year. So you've seen big differences there. But if he can get that confidence up, which in at least this last game, he did big time, then that's huge for this team, and it's huge for Jordan Kyrou.
I remember after Vladimir Tarasenko requested a trade, there was a game right afterwards. I can't remember the specific game, but he had a huge game. He was named the first star afterwards. He had the media availability with Panger at the time on Bally Sports Midwest, and I remember him just taking in the crowd and just sitting there for a second and listening to the chants of how much this fan base loved Vladimir Tarasenko and how much they embraced him. And again, this is after it had come out that he had requested a trade from the St. Louis Blues. And he talked about how much he loved playing here and how much he appreciated the fans. And there wasn't a specific question that was asked because it's not the spot that you do it, but about the trade request or anything like that. But you could just tell that was the undertone of it all. And this is obviously different, right? Jordan Kyrou has not requested a trade. He hasn't demanded a trade. He's not going to the organization saying, I don't want to be here anymore or anything like that. But the head coach that was here that won a Stanley Cup was fired, at least in part because he could not get the most out of Jordan Kyrou. At least that's the speculation that I think is pretty warranted, frankly. And so Jordan Kyrou's going out there on the ice on Saturday, and he's having to perform with that as the backdrop after getting booed by this fan base. And I found it to be remarkable that you saw a very similar type of a setting after that game on Saturday to what we saw after the Vladimir Tarasenko trade request a couple of years ago now. That's what this fan base should be, can be, etc. And it's why so many guys want to play here, because you don't have the same kind of microscope on you that you have in a Toronto, for example. But if you perform, if you go out there and do something, you will be revered the way that Craig Berube is and the way that he was appreciated here in St. Louis. If you go out there and just freaking work hard, you will be appreciated the way that guys like Braden Shin and Alex Steen are, and you'll have a potential job waiting for you afterwards the way that Alex Steen did and does, or Steve Ott did and does. All of these guys come back here for a reason. I don't know what Jordan Kyrou's future is going to be here in St. Louis. I have no idea. It might be that we look back on it as a one-off and it gets right back to the player that he was and we're all frustrated once again, right? But Saturday was a really great response by the fans, by the player, by the team, everybody involved. And I also found it to be interesting what Bannister had to say after the game on Kyrou's assist on the Parayko goal, because it became clear that he is being coached by this coach, maybe in the exact same way that he was under Craig Berube. It might be the exact same message, but the messenger has changed, and my hope is that now the message will be received a little bit more clearly. Here was Drew Bannister after the game on Saturday on Jordan Kyrou's assist on the Parayko goal and how that was something that they've been discussing.
I sat down with Jordan today a little bit and showed him a few clips, and that was one of the things that I know of him. Like he has deadly speed to the outside, and I think that's one thing that he hasn't been using enough. We saw it tonight. Like he drove that D wide, you got to step on him, and he brings it to the net hard, and then Perry was there to clean it up.
That's the kind of thing you want to see from Jordan Kyrou. Find a way to use your speed to make yourself a lethal weapon while you're on the ice. And he's not the only one. His line was the best line for the Blues, and there was no close second in that game over the weekend. 11 shots on goal for them at 5-on-5, 5 shots against. 69% Corsi rating, which was awesome. Nice, very nice to see in that game by the St. Louis Blues. Thomas, Kyrou, Buchnevich. We said coming into the season, that has to be the line that produces the offense for this team, because you look at the other 9 forwards, man, let's be honest, it's lacking. You'd like there to be a little bit more offensive production, but there's just not going to be. This is a retool. That's the way it's going to work. That top line, those 3 guys, 2 of them are getting paid $8 million a year. One of them probably will soon with Pavel Buchnevich. Those guys have to be the ones that drive the offense for the Blues. And at least for one game on Saturday, they did exactly that.
Yeah, when that line is on, you can be in any hockey game. When you're playing the Stars, who I think is one of the best teams in the Central, or if you're going to play the Avalanche, whoever you're playing, if you got that top line clicking, you're going to be in every hockey game because offensively they can be difference makers. And you saw that against Dallas this weekend. And once you get Jordan Kyrou to kind of get going offensively, then you're really going to have a line that is going to be feared across the NHL, because there haven't been a lot of moments where I've seen this year outside of that assist on the Parayko goal where we've said, man, look at the speed from Jordan Kyrou. It just hasn't been there. So we'll see if Drew Bannister is able to get it out of him. But if this top line is able to just find some chemistry, which I don't think they ever really had early on in the year, and then can get going offensively, you at least have a line that you can at least say, okay, that's the line we're going to when we need offense. Because all season, it just hasn't felt like they've got one thing that they can put kind of their chips in and say, this is what we're going to do right now, and that's going to help us win a hockey game. They just haven't had that. And if this top line can click and they can get going offensively, you can go, okay, we need a goal, we're down 1-0. Boom, there's our line. We're going to see if we can get this back even.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. You guys can watch us as well on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. This one comes from the 314. Guys, the Kyrou situation is the exact kind of spark that this Blues team needed to rally around to motivate all of them to play hard and to play better the way that they did in 2019. Now, this is where I will play the wet blanket just a little bit. I'm not expecting this team to go on a run the way they did in 2019.
What?
Why not?
No, we just followed the formula.
Why not?
I hope nobody else does either. The goal for this team continues to be the same that it was when Doug Armstrong spoke with the media prior to the season. Find a way to compete for a playoff spot. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. If you get in, maybe something weird happens and you can pull off an upset. Nobody expected the Florida Panthers to get to the Stanley Cup last year either. But the expectation, the goal, is to get to a better game, a more consistent game, a more consistent compete level. And if you do all of those things and your top line performs, you continue to see good play out of Colton Parayko, the defense continues to stay engaged, you get good performances out of Jordan Binnington. Like, if all of that happens, the rest, set it to the side. This year is about seeing those things that I just mentioned. And then hopefully you get some playoff gate revenue and that helps you money-wise for the future, right? Those are the things that this team should be focusing on, given the fact that we're still in the midst of a retool. This is not about going out there and changing your coach to win a Stanley Cup. The Blues are not in the same position as the Edmonton Oilers, for example. They are cup or bust. The Blues have been there in recent years. This year is about, okay, let's maintain the culture. Let's get some good vibes going back into that locker room. And hopefully that can turn things around, not to win a Stanley Cup for 2024, but to get things back on track. To just get things to a place where, like, I enjoy watching the games again. You as a fan will tune in on a random Tuesday night when they're playing against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Or you as a player don't dread going to the ice every single day. That's what they were trying to accomplish with this firing. For better or worse, I think that's what they're trying to get back to.
And I think that's big, not only because you want to see the team play better, but if this becomes a team where players are dreading going to the ice every day, you're not going to get the most out of them, and you're not going to get the most out of their development.
Yeah.
For Jordan Kyrou to take the next step, for Robert Thomas to take the next step, you got to go into games being as competitive as you can. And if you're dreading going to the rink every day, we're going to see exactly what we saw last year, where players check out. I mean, look at what Robert Thomas had been doing this whole season so far. And maybe he's just this type of player, but every single time he would miss the net or miss an opportunity, God, it's immediately.
Yep.
Even at practices, I was seeing this. Like, he'd miss the net in a practice and he'd be banner reading. He's so hard on himself. But if you put that player into a situation where this team's not playing competitively, they're not going to grow. You're going to see no progress, and then you're really setting yourself back in a retooling team.
That voice you just heard is Grant Francis. He's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex is out today, hoping to be back tomorrow, a little under the weather this morning. We will be joined, by the way, by former St. Louis Blues head coach, 2019 Stanley Cup champion, the Chief himself. Craig Berube will join us coming up at 1:15 today, so be sure to tell all your friends. Craig Berube coming up on the show at 1:15. But coming up next, there are new projections on what Yamamoto will get in free agency. And I think it's fair to say at this point, the Cardinals did the right thing by not waiting and trying to figure out where this sweepstakes was going to go. We'll explain why coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
teams are trying to give more years to get the AAV down for luxury tax. So don't be surprised if his deal ends up being 12 or 13 years, even 14 years, which we've never seen for a pitcher. If the deal's going to be, say, 300, instead of being 30 a year for 10, it may be a lot less than that for a lot more years. That was Jim Bowden on MLB Network Radio, former MLB general manager, talking about what the potential price tag will be for Yamamoto. $300+ million over 10+ years is now what we're projecting for Yamamoto. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. You're listening to BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. We'll talk Cardinals with Katie Wu coming up at 12:15. But T-Bone, we talked a lot about Yamamoto the last month or so of the season and then early in the offseason. Hey, what if it ends up being $200 million? Is that something the Cardinals could maybe consider if they really want to push themselves? And the answer was probably not. Now that we know the sweepstakes are getting well above $300 million and well above 10+ years, the Cardinals were never going to extend to that level. And frankly, they never should have. Bob Nightingale had this in his story today on USA Today. If he ends up getting a $300 million contract, just flat $300 million, the posting fee alone would be $47 million. So imagine this, T-Bone. This upcoming season, based on cash, right? Not the what you're paying towards the luxury tax or anything like that. The Cardinals care about cash. That is what they are judging their payroll on. They would have spent, even if they backloaded the deal, $20 million in salary and $47 million via the posting fee for Yamamoto this year. So you're talking about roughly $70 million going to Yamamoto. If they had done that, their offseason would have been over, and they probably would have had to clear some payroll space on their current roster as well. So why did they not go the Yamamoto route? Because frankly, I will give credit where it's due. I think that John Mozeliak had a pretty good read on where these markets were going to go in the offseason. I think he had a pretty good read on where the mid-tier innings eater was going to be. Because as we've seen a lot of these guys get signed, they're getting basically what Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn got here in St. Louis. Now, you may prefer some of the other guys. You may prefer Kenta Maeda or Michael Wacha over what you have in Gibson or Lynn. But they're all getting roughly the same contracts from wherever they ended up going. And he had a pretty good read, clearly, on what Yamamoto was going to get because he knew immediately, yeah, that ain't something that we're going to be paying attention to. So I'm not saying that they have aced the offseason. I still think that they need a front-end starting pitcher. I still think they need to add multiple bullpen arms to be able to get to that level. But I will give them credit for at least having what appears to be a pretty good read on where this Yamamoto situation is going to be and where the pitching market in general was going.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job in reading the market because now they're not in the waiting game in terms of waiting for a top-end arm on the market because of they're not sitting around waiting for the Yamamoto decision and then have to pivot. They've got at least their 3 starters, and now they can just kind of play it by ear, wait for a market to fall to where they think it's reasonable, whether that's a signing like maybe Blake Snell gets 3 years and maybe a higher AV, but they say, you know what, we can do that. Or it's the trade front, and they say, hey, you know what, nobody's offering the White Sox what they want for Dylan Cease. We'll jump in and we'll go out there and get them. So I think they did a good job reading the market, and you're right. They were never in on the Yamamoto sweepstakes if this is what it's going to come down to because I mean, if they were to sign Yamamoto, I think the best they could have probably done in an offseason was a C+. And the reason I say it is because they couldn't fill any other holes. They'd still be looking for 2 back-end starters. They'd still be looking for 2 bullpen arms. And they probably may even have to create another hole by trading away money off of the roster to try and refill another hole. So they never were realistically in on this Yamamoto sweepstakes. But I do agree with the notion that I think they did read the market well. I think they went a little too aggressive in reading the back-end starter market.
That's fair.
That I would say. But they felt it was necessary to get those guys locked up to contracts and make sure they get the innings eaters first. And then we all knew Sonny Gray was probably going to sign first because his market wasn't going to hinge on Yamamoto.
Right.
He's not in the same sweepstakes as a Montgomery, a Blake Snell. Honestly, Aaron Nola probably fell into this category, but he decided to stick in Philadelphia. He didn't hinge on what was going to be decided by Yamamoto. Everybody knew he was going to be 3 years, basically right around where he got, and then it was basically pick and choose where he wants to go. So I think they've done a really good job in terms of reading the market, and it's not like years prior where they jump too soon and they hand out like a Brett Cecil type contract where you look at it and go, wait, what just happened?
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line from the 314. Guys, it's not an either or. They could have done both, adding to the rotation and the bullpen while signing Yamamoto. No, they couldn't. Listen, man, if you are in a household that you've got a certain budget on a month in, month out basis, if you go over that budget, you're going to pay for it. And if you go too far over that budget, you're going to have to file for bankruptcy. Like, there comes a certain point in time where you have to look at yourself and be honest and say, hey, man, we can't do this. And for the Cardinals, saying we can't do this is what it would have come to with Yamamoto. If this was the logical conclusion, and it always was, for his sweepstakes, where you've got the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mets, the Phillies, etc., all in on his services, Boston, yeah, it was always probably going to become a place where they say, screw it, let's just go get the guy. He's 25 years old. We're going to have to spend a ton of money. It's the only opportunity for us to really get this kind of a pitcher on the market, and we're all desperate. All of those teams are legitimately in desperation mode to add top-end starting pitching. Then, yeah, that was probably going to end up getting out above the Cardinal skis, and they shouldn't and couldn't and wouldn't add $75 million to their cash spending in 2024 for one player. They should not do that. And I say that as somebody that says they should still add another starting pitcher. Like, they should go get somebody else. But $75 million is as if they had signed this offseason Sonny Gray and Blake Snell and Aaron Nola. Like, that's the cash that they would be handing out just for next year for Yamamoto. So, no, I'm not going to hold their feet to the fire for not going out and doing that, because I think that's crazy. I think these teams that are going out and doing that are teams that don't care about money. They're willing to spend wildly because the money just doesn't matter to them. The Yankees, the Mets, the Dodgers, they're looking at this and saying, it's a smart business move.
Yeah.
It's a smart business move for us to go out and add a guy like this because it's going to help contribute to our winning, which helps contribute towards our bottom line, and they don't have the budget that the Cardinals deal with. Right or wrong, that's how baseball operates. So when you look at the way that this is going to go, I don't blame the Cardinals at all, and I also wouldn't want to do a 12-year deal for a pitcher. Just philosophically disagree with that. I think the Cardinals should be more open to like 5 or 6 year deals for starting pitchers. 10 to 12 is insane, man. Think about who the best pitchers were in Major League Baseball 12 years ago, and then just go ahead and go down that like top 30 list. Count how many of them were still great 6 years later. And we don't know if Yamamoto is going to be great. He might be. The odds are probably in his favor of being a great pitcher in Major League Baseball, but we don't know that yet because we haven't seen him in Major League Baseball yet. So I don't blame the Cardinals for not going this route, honestly.
Yeah, and 7 years is like my cutoff for a starting pitcher because of what you just said. Pitchers break, and if they break, they may never recover. I mean, look at Jack Flaherty. Jack Flaherty we thought was going to be the next ace for the St. Louis Cardinals, and then he dealt with shoulder issues, and he never got back to being the same guy. And look, Yamamoto, probably a more talented pitcher coming over from Japan than what Jack Flaherty was in his prime. But once something goes wrong, it can just set everything back. And if you're locked into that for 12, 13 years, that's the kind of deal if you're the St. Louis Cardinals. For the Dodgers, you can throw money around, and if a guy's not healthy, it doesn't matter. Like, remember when they had Carl Crawford? He never played for them. Yep. It didn't matter. They can light money on fire. For the Cardinals, that's the kind of move that can set a franchise back for 12 to 13 years if it goes poorly. So if it was going to be this, and again, this is what it looks like it's going to be, no chance should the Cardinals have done it, or would they have done it?
All right, last thing on the pitching market. Ken Rosenthal had a piece over the weekend on some of the updated trade targets on the pitching market. We've also seen some of these from Mark Feinsand. There was an update from Bob Nightingale as well. All of this seems to be moving very slowly. But Dylan Cease, we think that market's going to continue to move and slowly until after the Yamamoto sweepstakes, maybe even after the Blake Snell sweepstakes. They want to find out, okay, who still has a chair when the music stops with this musical chair game that's going on right now with front and starting pitching. The White Sox do. Jesus Luzardo is a name that's been kind of dangled out there. According to multiple reports, the Royals were in talks with the Marlins to potentially acquire Jesus Luzardo. They wanted their young power hitter, Vinny Pasquantino, and the Royals decided, you know what, we're going to pivot here. We're going to go get Michael Wacha instead. We just want to pay the money instead of giving up one of our good young players. Credits to the Royals for doing that. Normally, they would have just given up a player to not have to pay the money. But Jesus Luzardo is a guy that I really like. I think he's an excellent pitcher. It's just going to cost a ton to get him. The equivalent here in St. Louis would probably be Nolan Gorman for what Pasquantino means to the Royals and then kind of his future value as well. And then another guy that we have not really brought up a lot is Framber Valdez, who was rumored on Friday to be out in the trade circuits. Now, Ken Rosenthal had an update today. Quote, trading left-hander Framber Valdez, who is projected to earn $12 million in the second year of arbitration, could create some financial flexibility under the Astros threshold, but it remains unclear whether they will pursue such a course. According to Bob Nightingale, there were 5 or 6 teams that have reached out to the Astros about Valdez's availability. For me, if we're looking at the trade market now post Tyler Glasnow, I would rank them in terms of my interest level. Valdez 1, Dylan Cease 2, Jesus Luzardo, but I would be willing to give up a pretty decent package for any of those 3. T-Bone, how would you rank those 3 starters that are now potentially available in the trade market?
So I agree with Framber Valdez at number 1, and now he would get expensive next year, but that's a problem for next year. Estimated 12.8 in his arbitration year this year. I think he's got the best stuff of that group. I mean, he just finished top 10 in Cy Young voting the last 2 years and was 11th back in 2020. So
and he's a big game pitcher.
Yeah, big game pitcher. Will eat innings as well the last 2 years, 198 and 201 and a third. So he'll eat innings as well, since the Cardinals love the theme of eating innings.
Yep.
Number 2 for me, I would probably go Dylan Cease as well, and I think Luzardo's definitely number 3, mostly just because Luzardo, I know a lot of people will say this about Cease too, Luzardo's track record, really one good full season as a starter, and that was last year. Year prior was good, but only made 18 starts. Cease is a guy that, again, 2 years ago had Cy Young votes, but I would agree with your ranking. I would go Valdez 1, Cease 2, Luzardo 3.
If the asking price is Nolan Gorman plus for any of those 3, are you willing to match or to meet that ask?
So I would do it for Valdez. I would consider it for Cease, and then I don't know if I would do it for Luzardo, which I know probably sounds weird because he's got more years of control. But again, I've only seen it just once. I want to see him do it again for a full season before I really go all in and want to give up a big trade chip like Nolan Gorman. But yeah, I would definitely do it for Valdez, and I would probably do it for Dylan Cease as well, because you need somebody that's up there with Sonny Gray and provides that 1-2 punch for October.
Valdez is the guy that I'm doing it without question.
Yeah. Agreed.
If I can get a guy of Framber Valdez's skill and I have to give up way more than what I'm comfortable with, I'm willing to do it. Because that dude changes your October outlook. I have no idea. I think Dylan Cease will. I think Jesus Luzardo could. I know Framber Valdez does. That dude has taken the mound in a World Series game and shoved. The pressure did not matter to him. And even after like a weird, probably month or so of the regular season, he got himself back on track and he figured it out when it mattered the most in the postseason. So Framber Valdez, to me, would be my number 1 target with a bullet. Like if I'm John Mozeliak, I'm calling down to Houston being like, hey guys, like, you serious about this? You actually willing to trade the guy that's been your number 1 starter other than Justin Verlander? And if so, let's have a serious conversation about what that would look like for us, what we would need to give up. He's the guy that I would have put in bold with asterisks next to of this is the guy that we need to be targeting this offseason. I have no idea if it's realistic. I would bet against it. But if he is truly available, that's the guy that the Cardinals should be targeting the rest of the offseason.
Would you sign him to a contract extension if you acquired him?
No.
What play out the process?
Yeah. Next year, in the offseason, you at least explore it because it's going to be $20 million anyway. So if you're going to have to pay, $20 million on a 1-year deal or give him 5-year extension, yeah, then you talk about it. But right now, no.
Because
it's a pitcher. I always let them the position players I'm willing to extend long term while they're in their entry level deals. The pitchers, let's play this process out, and then going into the final year, we can revisit it.
Yeah, I wonder what he would want, because I was thinking like you could do 5 years, eat the last 2 of arbitration, and then build that thing up for 3 more years after that. Because if you acquire him, I'd be on board with offering a contract extension out, because like you said, he's a big game pitcher and just has electric stuff. And I'm the guy that's anti-contract extension. I would do it for Valdez if you acquired him.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. That is Grant Francis, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters. Who did we learn more about yesterday, the Bills or the Cowboys? We'll do that next here on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Over the weekend, the Blues, an overtime winner over the Dallas Stars, 4-3, their first win of the season after being down by 2 goals in a game. They come back to beat their Central Division rival in overtime. Blues will be back in action tomorrow as they are in Tampa Bay to take on the Lightning. Pregame, an early one at 5 o'clock. Puck drop at 6 here on your home for the Blues 101 ESPN. And then tonight we'll have some Monday Night Football for you. Seahawks and Eagles, that pregame coming up at 6:30. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff. Find your roads and shop 24/7 at londoff.com and londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
All right, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex out today, hoping to be back tomorrow. A little under the weather this morning. Let's start with this. The big game yesterday was the Bills absolutely destructing the Dallas Cowboys. 31-10 was the final score. It wasn't even that close. This game was over from the time that they blew the opening whistle, T-Bone. My question to you, who did we learn more about yesterday? The Bills or the Cowboys?
I think the Bills. I think the Bills showed that they're able to win in multiple ways now, because that wasn't a game that was really on the back of Josh Allen. That was the run game. He
threw 15 passes and completed 7 of them.
Yeah, exactly. The fact that they just ran the ball down the throat of the Dallas Cowboys was impressive. And it showed me, A, that Dallas can be vulnerable to the run, but B, it showed me, you know what, Buffalo doesn't have to just rely on Josh Allen, because we've talked about it. Josh Allen, though, that sentence should say, hey, you can rely on a franchise quarterback that at times looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I've also seen him turn the ball over a ton. And if you can minimize that and run the football with James Cook in that backfield, they feel like the team that's going to be the trendy pick once if they sneak into the playoffs. I think we learn more about Buffalo.
I would say that we learned more about Dallas and that the Cowboys are going to cowboy again in the playoffs this year. And what are they now, 1-3 in really games that they've played good opponents this season?
Lost to San Francisco 42-10, lost to the Philadelphia Eagles 28-23. They beat Seattle. That was a big one for them. 41-35 though. And then they beat Philly the second time around 33-13. And of course this weekend happened.
So 2-3 against pretty good opponents. And that's not going to work in the postseason.
On if Seattle's a good opponent.
I don't know how I classify that.
That's why I said 1-3 originally, because Seattle's like, meh, if you want to give it to him, okay. But I don't. This weekend made me think about Dallas. This is just going to happen again in the postseason. Like, this is typical Cowboys football.
It's them on the road that concerns me. When they go on the road and they play against these quality opponents, something happens, man. There's a flip that is switched in a bad way, or a switch that is flipped in a bad way. They go off. And I can't explain why that is. I really don't understand it. I don't view Jerry World as this like excellent home field advantage, but it has been for them. I think the biggest thing is they're front runners the way that the Ravens used to be. If you guys remember, for the last couple of seasons, and they might be this way again in 2023, but they've been leading or tied. I don't know if you saw the stat last night. 90% of their games so far this year, they've been leading or tied. So we don't really know how they respond when they get down. But the Cowboys are similar. It reminds me of the old Peyton Manning Indianapolis Colts teams. If you guys remember, the way that they had assembled those teams, it was fast defenders that were going to get after the passer. But then if you could run the ball against them, and it got away from them a little bit, and they were coming from behind, that defense had no chance. They could not stop the run, and they couldn't stop the bleeding. It was like a snowball effect that just kept going downhill. I feel the same way about the Cowboys. When they're playing from ahead, the pass rush is working. The corners are able to jump some of those routes. They know what's coming their way. When they're playing from behind, and you saw this yesterday, James Cook just tore them apart. They had no chance in stopping the Bills' running game, and the Bills had no reason to do anything different, because why would I? I'm playing from in front. This is perfect for us. So I actually agree with you, Grant. I think we learned a little bit more about the Cowboys yesterday in a negative way than what we learned about the Bills. We all knew the Bills had this potential. It was a matter of them actually going out there and doing it. Somebody on the text line said, I owe Josh Allen an apology. No, I do not. Josh Allen didn't do anything yesterday. He had a few really nice plays, especially with his legs. He finished the day 7 for 15 for 94 yards. I'm not apologizing to that man.
But he didn't throw an interception, did he?
Yeah.
He did not. But he did the week prior. He did the week before that.
But not
he did
last
the week
week.
before that. He did the week before that. He did every single week other than last week since week 4 of the NFL season. He has thrown an interception. I don't owe that man an apology. He is who we thought he was. When he plays well, he can be the best player in the NFL. When he plays poorly, he can lose his team the game. We all know that. I would also add this, though. That team's good enough to go to the Super Bowl. They are. And the AFC is bad enough that they could sneak in. Nobody wants to play that team, including my Chiefs. If they play the Chiefs in the playoffs, they can absolutely go into Kansas City and win. That is how talented they are.
Especially if they get that confidence up towards the end of the season going it. Like, this could be a huge win for that team over the Cowboys, because if they can establish a level of confidence after that and carry that over in the coming games heading into the postseason, and all of a sudden you're the hottest team going into the playoffs, then you're a dangerous team.
Yeah, and their schedule opens up a little bit over the next couple of weeks. They've got the Chargers with some stick at quarterback, Easton Stick at quarterback for them. The New England Patriots, who I watched yesterday against the Chiefs, and that team stinks.
Well, they were in it for a while.
Chiefs tried really hard to hand that one over again, and the Patriots were like, no, you take it. You take it. You take it. We don't want this.
Tony literally handed the ball to the Patriots at one play, too.
I think the division will be determined in Week 18 at Miami. I think they will have a chance in the final week of the season to not just make the playoffs, but to win their division. And that all depends on what happens over the next couple of weeks with the Dolphins, who take on the Cowboys and the Baltimore Ravens. If they lose one of those games, that last game will be for the divisional win. So it's going to be interesting down the stretch. All right, next thing up here in NFL Quick Hitters. Guys, did the Falcons loss yesterday in Carolina do enough to make you wonder if Arthur Smith is coaching for his job over the next few weeks?
Oh, not wonder. He should be fired. I don't need no wonder no more. He's terrible as a head coach. They have all kinds of first-round weapons in Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson, and Robinson had, 11 yards rushing yesterday?
I was furious.
It's unbelievable. It's unacceptable. It's not unbelievable. It's unacceptable.
In a torrential downpour, he had 7 carries.
And you're relying on Desmond Ridder to be the guy. I said this on Friday when we talked about, I think, our NFL weekend look ahead. I said, don't be shocked if the Falcons lose to the Panthers, even though they've only got one win. Any team that has Desmond Ridder at quarterback can lose on any given week. And I forgot to mention how they have an incapable head coach. They need to fire Arthur Smith, and they need to bring in an offensive mind that can come in and figure out the way to use these weapons. Use Robinson how he should. Use Pitts how he should. And then draft a quarterback or go sign a quarterback in free agency and bring in somebody that is actually capable of playing the quarterback position at a just average level, and they would be a playoff caliber team.
And that's my thing, too. Like, you can use the excuse all you want that you don't have a good quarterback, because they don't. But if you don't have a good quarterback, at least use your first-round pick star running back. I don't understand that. And another thing I don't understand, why in the NFL, I'm a hockey guy, obviously, why in the NFL do coaches get so long of a runway? Like Brandon Staley, he should have been fired 2 years ago. And now you look at Arthur Smith, like, I don't understand it. If this was the NHL, those coaches would have been long gone.
Yeah, Arthur Smith, I get it. He did a good job last year. He did a capable job last year. And I think part of why they didn't add a quarterback in the offseason was job security. Once you get the quarterback, your timeline starts right then and there. You've got to win. And they didn't add a quarterback, so it was like, okay, well, this is, another building year, and he can sell it as once we get the quarterback in here, now you can start evaluating me on our job. So just adds another year of cashing them checks, baby. I think that's part of what led to that decision. Now, that's bad decision making if it was part of it, but I think he should be fired. I think you've got to go out there and get somebody that can actually get this team together. And I think there are a couple of names that could become available this offseason that are really interesting for them. Mike Tomlin, Mike Vrabel, Bill Belichick. Those guys are all really good coaches, and I have no idea what the future holds for any of the 3 of them. So if you have an opportunity to add one of them, go for it. All right, last thing here for NFL Quick Hitters. Tonight, Eagles on the road at the Seahawks. It's a 3.5-point line in favor of Philly. Jalen Hurts is under the weather. We don't know what his status is going to be for this game. I think Geno Smith is going to play in this one, but he is also hurt heading into it. T-Bone, what are you anticipating from this one tonight? You'll be able to hear this, by the way, on 101 ESPN starting at 6:30.
I'm expecting a shootout because I don't know what the hell Philly's doing with their defense. Their defensive coordinator's moving to the press box. Matt Patricia's now calling the plays. Like, I expect there to be points in this one. I do expect Philly to win, though. I think they've just got the better roster. But I think this is going to be like a 35-32 shootout, something along those lines.
It's desperation time for Seattle, by the way.
I think it's desperation time for Philly. There's not good vibes coming out of Philadelphia right now for that team that had Super Bowl aspirations. So I expect a shootout. I expect Philly to win. Don't expect much. If you like defense, turn something else on.
See, maybe I'm off on this. I don't get a sense of the Eagles being worried even if they lose this game. Like, when I look at the Eagles, even if they lose tonight, I still think, they're going to get into the playoffs. And when I think of that team, I think they can still make a run. Like, as long as Jalen Hurts is healthy by playoffs, I'm not too worried about them regardless of what happens in Seattle tonight. And I think Seattle, obviously, they need this more than Philadelphia does. So even if the Eagles go out and lose tonight, I'm still not all that concerned about the Eagles.
I'm not concerned about the Eagles if they were in the AFC. I am concerned about the Eagles in that conference.
That's fair.
Because you've got a juggernaut in San Francisco right now. And if you're not firing on all cylinders, I don't think you can beat that team. And I don't think the Eagles are firing on all cylinders right now. The offense feels clunky at times. It's had some of the same issues that the Chiefs offense has had this year, where it just doesn't look the same as it did a year ago. And I think Shane Steichen being removed from the equation, that was a bigger piece of the Jenga board than we all expected it to be. And then on defense, if you're like basically firing your defense coordinator in week 15, well, buddy, that ain't a great sign. And if your answer to that question is Matt Patricia, you're asking the wrong questions. It's not a good situation for Philly. I don't think it's going to matter enough tonight to lose them the football game. I don't think Seattle's in a good place right now either, but I do not feel good about the Eagles long-term right now. All right, coming up in about 10 minutes or so, there are two things that showed us signs of life under Drew Bannister over the weekend. We'll tell you what those were coming up in about 10 minutes or so. But questions and answers, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Your local car star wants to remind you winter is coming, so check your tires so you don't end up in an accident.
The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements.
STL Today, the vote is in, and there's no need for a recount. I'm Jim Onder, and I want to thank you, the people of St. Louis, for acknowledging my team at Onder Law as STL Today's 2023's best law firm in St. Louis. As always, we will continue our mission to hold companies accountable, change the way they do business, and make St. Louis a safer place.
When you're injured, you need the best. Call Onder Law at 314 or 618-90000.
Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
Hey guys, did you know there's a generic form of Viagra that works just the same, but is 95% cheaper? And you can get it online? Go to hims.com/joy. Through HIMS, you'll get a free medical consultation, discreet shipping if prescribed, and the process is 100% online. To start your free online visit, go to hims.com/joy. That's HIMS.com/JOY.
You might have heard Doug Voss and Safe Money Radio. His shows have been on several radio stations for many years.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. You give us a question, we will tell you what we're thinking here on 101 ESPN. All right, let's get to this one from the 636. Guys, after another tough moment for Kadarius Toney yesterday, do you think the Chiefs will bench him? I do. I think yesterday was the breaking point for the Chiefs with Kadarius Toney, and specifically for Patrick Mahomes with Kadarius Toney. When he is dropping multiple passes that result directly in interceptions, and this time, I don't know if you guys saw the reaction from Patrick Mahomes, where he was furious on the bench. He does not show you that kind of frustration very often, last week notwithstanding. I think that this is the time where you will officially see him exclusively for gadget plays and no longer as a wide receiver for the Chiefs. He and Sky Moore should be relegated to the bench.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're costing you right now. Drops that go to the other team. You can tell Mahomes is just fed up with it. And you've seen this frustration just building all season long. I mean, their wide receiver room is going to cost them in the playoffs. I don't think they're winning the conference because of it, but I can't see how you could play him outside of after what happened yesterday.
Are the Chiefs 2 wins better without Kadarius Toney this season? I think back to the Lions game. I think back to the offside game.
Yeah, directly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're 2 games better, and they're likely the favorite to get the number 1 seed in the AFC. Yeah. So, yeah, I would say when that happens, you should probably go ahead and no longer play that guy any longer. In fact, if they wanted to cut him, go ahead. I would have no problem with it. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers from the 314. BK, any thoughts on all the cryptic messages that are coming out from Mizzou coaches this morning? Yeah, I think they're going to get Caden Green, the offensive tackle from Oklahoma that was a 4-star, borderline 5-star recruit last year, ended up starting for Oklahoma this year at left guard as a true freshman. I think he's going to be your starting left tackle next year. That is not me reporting. That is me reading into it. But based on informed speculation, I think that is what Missouri is hinting at right now. And this is, other than Luther Burden, maybe Williams Nwaneri, you could argue, the probably second biggest recruiting win of the Eli Drinkwitz era, if it ends up taking place. It is that big of a deal. This guy is a future NFL starting potential first-round left tackle, and you're getting him via the portal from Oklahoma. That is not something that I had ever foreseen taking place at Missouri.
They throwing money on trees down in Columbia. How are they getting all these guys? Where's all this NIL money coming from?
They're all in year. They have taken their chips and pushed them to the middle because you have 1 year left with Luther Burden. Luther Burden is a game-changing presence, a potential Heisman candidate on your team. You have to do everything you possibly can in the first year of the 12-team playoff, where it becomes possible for you to make the playoff and not make the SEC championship game for the first time ever. Yeah, you've got to go all in on this year, because if you do and it works out, now you continue this recruiting momentum into future seasons. Missouri football is in a very good place right now.
Who's spending more money this offseason, Mizzou football or Cardinals baseball?
Oh, Mizzou.
It's close.
It's insane. Every time someone goes to the portal, they're connected to them. I've never seen this before, because I knew they'd have NIL money to throw around, like it helped with the Luther Burden. I figured it'd be they could get 1 or 2 guys. I kid you not, they're in on everybody. It's insane. Meanwhile, Illinois here, I was excited when I saw, hey, we offered a 3-star quarterback a scholarship for 2025. That was the big news for Illini football this weekend.
Who would have thought Mizzou's the new Dodgers of the NCAA?
Yeah, I mean, Ole Miss is the new Dodgers.
Yeah, that's true.
Mizzou is Mizzou's
the Mets.
The Yankees.
Maybe the Mets?
Yeah,
Yankees?
Yankees or Mets. Ole Miss and Mizzou right now are battling for 1-2 in terms of best off seasons in the SEC. It's really something to watch.
I can't wait till drinks.
I don't love that Notre Dame, their offensive coordinator, took the job today at Troy.
Oh, is that a problem?
I don't love that.
Why?
Don't love that one bit.
Why? What could go wrong?
Don't love it. Kirby Moore is a great offensive coordinator who hasn't signed that new contract just yet. So don't need that. Don't need Notre Dame coming in and upsetting the apple cart.
Drinks called plays before. Just go back to that. It'd be fine.
Keep him around. Let him just keep calling the plays. 1 more year. I need 1 more year from Kirby Moore, from Blake Baker, from Luther Burden. Keep everybody intact for 1 more season, and then we can talk about what happens afterwards.
Maybe, what's his name from New England's going to be available, the OC, Bill O'Brien.
No. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. Coming up in about 10 minutes or so, we're talking to Katie Woo, the Cardinals insider for The Athletic. She tweeted over the weekend that not one, but two relievers were in town to talk to the Cardinals. What does she anticipate the Cardinals doing to fortify that bullpen? We'll talk to Katie about that coming up here in just a little bit. But next, speaking of fortifying the roster, Drew Bannister has done exactly that in his first two games as the Blues interim head coach. What have we seen as changes under him? And what would have to happen for you to look back and say, you know what, it was the right call for the Blues to fire Craig Berube, even if I didn't like it? We'll talk about that next here on 101 ESPN.
We were direct, like we weren't. I thought we managed the puck well. When we had opportunities to attack, we took those opportunities. But when we were running out of time and space. The guys managed the puck well. They made smart decisions. We were able to get on our retrievals. The second period, we had a lot of momentum going there. But I think just the habits and details were better.
That was Blues interim head coach Drew Bannister after the game on Saturday alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex is out today, hoping to be back tomorrow, a little under the weather this morning. Guys, the Blues have done stuff under Drew Bannister in the first 2 games under him that they hadn't done the entire season. In fact, on Saturday, it was the first time all year that the Blues had erased a multi-goal deficit, which feels impossible given the fact that we are 30 games into the year, and yet it was true. That was the first time they had done that so far this year. The Stars had 8 of the game's first 10 shots on goal. The Blues got off to that terrible start, and we've seen this so many times so far this year. The opposing team starts off hot, the Blues get down early, and then they just shut it down for the rest of the night because they know we can't come back. We're incapable of doing that. We're ineligible to win after we get off to a slow start. But the Blues did. They did come back. They had a penalty kill coming off of a challenge that got them going. And then they had a power play that got them back on track. They were 0 for 19 on the power play in their last seven games. And they finally scored a goal on that unit. And then, boom, you're right back into this thing. Special teams get you back into it. 5-on-5 allowed you to win it. Guys, this is the team that we thought we were going to see this year. I didn't expect them to be great. I didn't think they were going to be a team that were like first or second in the division competing for a Stanley Cup. Nobody realistically expected that. But if they have an all-around game that they commit to, they're talented enough to be able to come back in individual games against a team on a back-to-back with their backup goalie in net. That's the kind of performance that you should expect out of the Blues regularly, and they weren't doing that at all prior to Bannister. Give them credit where it's due. Drew Bannister seems to have unlocked that from them early on in his tenure.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Early on, he's been able to unlock the compete in the Blues, and that was something that really started to dissipate at the back end there with Craig Berube, to where you just didn't know what you were going to get in, night out. And look, I still think that's going to end up being the case with this Blues team, but at least for the time being, they're showing the urgency, they're showing the compete, they're going out on the ice, and they're giving everything they've got in these games, and it's what led to that comeback in the game on Saturday against the Dallas Stars. And I think part of that, too, is making sure guys are playing to their strengths. You know, Jordan Kyrou utilizing the speed for really what felt like the first time this year. I don't think there's been a moment until this past Saturday where I said, wow, did you see that play by Kyrou where he just turned on the jets and blew past the defender and scored a goal? This was the first time you saw it. And getting those guys to play back with some confidence and getting that top line to click, that's going to be the change that Drew Bannister's trying to unlock in this Blues team. And we'll see if it sustains in the long term. First 2 games, it's good to see what we've seen so far, but what will be the real test is if they can maintain this over the next 10 to 20 games.
Yeah, there are a few things that we haven't seen this season that we've seen in the couple games behind Drew Bannister. 2 of them being what you guys talked about with the comeback, and T-Bone with what you were just talking about. But you also have on the power play, you're starting to see some one-timers every once in a while. Robert Thomas had a one-timer on the power play in that Ottawa game. And you saw a couple one-timers last game on the power play, one of them being Saad's goal. So I think if you start seeing the penalty kill not outscoring the power play, that would be ideal for this team. And it's trending in the right direction. You saw it in the Ottawa game where the power play at least looked better than it had. Yep. And then you finally saw some production last game. I think if you start to see things trending in the right direction like that, players doing things that they weren't doing before and finding success with it, getting their confidence back like I had mentioned earlier, that's how you start to see things trend in the positive direction under Bannister.
So the follow-up question that I wanted to ask, and we'll get to Katie Wu here in about 5 minutes or so here on 101 ESPN. Is there anything that can happen for you to look back and say, you know what, even though I hated it, even if I may have disagreed with the decision, and by the way, Craig Berube will join us coming up at 1:15, and I feel that way about it. I didn't like that they fired Craig Berube, but is there anything that can happen where you look back on it and say, you know what, it was the right call. It was the right decision to do at that time, and now that I have the benefit of hindsight, I can now look back at it and say, I hate it. I think Craig Berube's going to go on to be a good coach elsewhere, but I get it, and it was the right decision. Can that happen for you, T-Bone? Is there something that they can do with their play on the ice or anything otherwise that would lead you to that conclusion?
I think it can happen, and I don't think it's necessarily a knock on Berube if it does happen. It's just you start to see consistent play from the Blues. You start to say, okay, tonight, or let's see, the Blues play Tuesday night, tomorrow night against the Lightning. I go into that game and I go, all right, I know what I'm going to see from the Blues. They may not win. They may lose the game. They may lose 4-0. But at least I know I'm going to get compete on every single shift from every single player, and I know what to expect. I think that was just the problem with at the end of this Craig Berube tenure, really the last, I'd say, year and a half with Craig Berube, was you just never knew what you're going to get from the Blues. And I think that was just a sign of potentially the message getting stale, because I don't think there was anything that, I don't think Bannister's done anything tactically yet that really seems to signal a difference from Craig Berube. I just think there's the chance that the message went stale, and if that's the case, you bring in a new coach, and if he's somehow able to get the message through just in a different way, and they start to play some consistent hockey, not looking at wins and losses, but consistent hockey, then yeah, I would say that it was the right decision.
I think for me, it's going to be how they lose. That's where it's going to make a difference for me, and Armstrong has said this. It's not always that the team is losing, it's how they lose games. Sure. It's the lack of competitiveness in those games. And I think whenever they do lose games, number one, how they compete in those games. We just saw them go down 2 goals and battle back to win. But how do they do that consistently when they go down? Are they still battling back even when they're not coming back and winning? Are they still playing hard in the full 60 minutes? And how they respond to losses in the next game. I think those are 2 huge things, because this isn't a team that has the roster that's going to win, just go on a 10-game win streak. It's likely not going to happen.
No.
They're going to lose games. To me, it's how the team competes. And it's not on Berube, like you said, Tanner. I think sometimes the message just goes stale. We hear that all the time. Ken Hitchcock is a Hockey Hall of Famer, one of the best coaches in NHL history. He got fired for Mike Yeo. So it's going to happen. You're going to get
fired. He got fired a lot.
I mean, look at all these coaches. Like Peter DeBoer, good coach, right? We all agree with that. Bruce Cassidy, good coach, right? We all agree with that. Craig Berube, good coach. He's been fired twice now. Ken Hitchcock, Gerard Gallant. Good coaches get fired in the NHL. That's just how it works, man. I don't understand why it has to take place that way. We talked to Bruce Boudreau on Friday. I think he's a good NHL hockey coach. Now, maybe it's passed him by at this point. I don't know. But he had 3 different stints that basically lasted 3.5 years. As you look at what Craig Berube did here in St. Louis, the first 3.5 years for him were amazing. You could argue first 4 years were pretty damn good. And then for whatever reason, much like all of these other coaches that we've just discussed, the message gets stale. And I can't explain why that happens. I think it's silly that NHL teams just decide overnight, I'm tuning out that coach. He can't motivate me any longer. What? In what other walk of life would that be deemed acceptable? None. No other walk of life. However, hockey's different. And I can't compare my job to theirs because it is a different world in which they operate. And in their world, they tune out their coaches after 3 to 4 years. And it appears early on that they have decided that they are now willing to go out there on the ice every single night and play hard again. I don't know how long that's going to last. I don't know if they have that in them. But that is the way that they can convince me that it was the right decision, is if they continue doing that over the long haul. He's Tanner Hendrickson. That's Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get to in or out. But next, Katie Woo reported over the weekend that not 1, but 2 relievers were in St. Louis to meet with the Cardinals about potentially seeing what the match would look like here with the Cardinals. We'll ask Katie what she expects the team to do the rest of the offseason when she joins us next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. Welcome back to BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Alex is out today, a little under the weather, hoping to be back in tomorrow. Coming up in just a little while, we'll talk to Craig Berube. Joins us at 1:15. So be sure to tell your friends. Former Blues head coach, Stanley Cup champion, the Chief himself, Craig Berube, joins us coming up at 1:15. But right now, we're happy to go out to the 101 ESPN hotline to be joined by our friend, Cardinals insider for The Athletic and 101 ESPN. She's Katie Wu joining us here on the show. Katie, we appreciate the time as always. Hope you've been enjoying your off season. How you doing today?
I'm good, guys. Thanks for having me on, I guess, BK and Tanner today. What a time.
It is a great time to be alive. Sometimes T-Bone gets into the adult chair, and we're always excited when he does.
Let's go, Tanner.
I love this chair.
Great.
All right, Katie, you had a report over the weekend that the Cardinals are, quote, believed to have met with at least 2 pitchers at Busch Stadium this week, including Yuki Matsui, the NPB star reliever. Can you add any context for us into that report? What else are you hearing about the Cardinals and their quest for relievers?
At this time, I can't. It's more of what we've been hearing for the last 3 weeks or so with the Cardinals getting Sonny Gray and then trading Tyler O'Neill. Bullpen priority remains the focus. It does not mean that they are closing the door on potential starting pitching opportunities. What it does mean is that they're looking at their priority list and what they need to focus on right now, and John Mozeliak has identified that as the bullpen, specifically something high leverage. We've heard him talk about this before. They have Ryan Housley, Giovanni Gallegos. They're very confident in a bounce-back season and a high-ceiling guy in Jojo Romero. But when you're looking at the overall bulk of the bullpen, probably not enough to really sway fans to be excited or optimistic about the back end of that bullpen. So the Cardinals' priority going into the new year is trying to find one more high-leverage guy to solidify that bullpen. They did meet with Yuki Matsui, as reported by multiple people, and that seems like someone that could fit that mold. They've also checked in on Jordan Hicks. They also attempted to bring back Chris Stratton. Stratton, of course, signed with the Kansas City Royals, was persuaded a little bit by his teammate Will Smith with the Rangers to do that. So they have been active in the free agent relief pitching market, just nothing yet to show for it.
Katie, you mentioned they're looking for a high leverage arm. Are they still looking for a swing arm? I know that was something that Mo had mentioned earlier in the offseason.
I haven't heard too much of that yet. Again, never say never. I think right now when you're looking at the makeup of the relief pitching, a high leverage guy and then also a veteran guy like Chris Stratton, I had a conversation with Mo about this at the winter meetings, would be their 2 priorities because that bullpen is young. And that's not to say that young guys that can't go out and perform. We've seen it before with the 2022 team. But it doesn't hurt to have that kind of veteran mold. It's kind of what they did with the rotation to bring back into the bullpen. So not quite sure if a swingman is necessarily on their radar. Of course, they won't rule it out. But for me, it seems like the priority for the Cardinals front office going forward or the next week or two, it is to shore up some bullpen depth and get a high leverage guy that can really tie in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning.
Katie, I don't think we've spoken on the air since the winter meetings, but I found Ollie's comments specifically pertaining to second base to be really interesting. He talked about all of the other spots on the lineup, and he basically said, hey, here's your lineup, and then he got to second base. He's like, we're still kind of working through that depending on what happens the rest of the offseason. What did you make of his comments and Mo's comments about what their current plan is at second base?
I think that if the Cardinals roll in to Jupiter with the same position playing roster they have right now, it would be an open competition for Brendan Donovan and Nolan Gorman at second base. Now, okay, a lot of things can change, right? We're only in the middle of December. There's still 2 months before pitchers and catchers report. I did think it was kind of interesting putting Ollie's comments from the winter meetings and then Mo's comments yesterday on KMOX about different guys being solidified. Obviously, you have Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt, Wilson Contreras in spots, but there's a lot of fluidity in what the middle infield could look like. And I know the Cardinals traded Tyler O'Neill to alleviate some of that positional logjam, but guys, they still have a positional logjam. So for me, it was interesting to see, could the Cardinals potentially swing a trade? I think Mo's been pretty honest. They're not shutting the door on any opportunity there. Whether or not a Nolan Gorman or a Brendan Donovan could be in the mix remains to be seen. But if this team goes out, and this is, again, the same position playing roster they have come spring, I would expect it to be a very healthy competition going forward at second base.
Katie, is there anything on the outside from the St. Louis Cardinals to where, like, if the Cubs become big spenders here in the offseason like they're expected to, it changes from sitting back and saying, let's wait and see if a trade develops or what the market looks like, and they say we have to go out and get someone else to help this rotation?
That's a good question, and I think that's something that the Cardinals are weighing as well. I mean, again, we still have 2 months to go in the offseason, but the NL Central hasn't exactly wowed anybody with their moves, with the exception of the Cardinals. I do think that Sonny Gray was a great signing for them. Mm-hmm. But is the NL Central a competitive division? No. At this point, I think you can argue that the AL Central is actually more competitive than the NL Central. So I don't want to say that the Cardinals are going to be reactive, but this is an organization that prides itself on its consistency and stability, 2023 season obviously aside. And they aren't going to swing a mega trade and blow up a positional core they believe in just for the sake of doing so. I think it would have to depend on what, maybe what the Reds are doing. I think they're maybe 1 or 2 starting pitchers away from being a legitimate playoff contender. The Cubs, of course, that they're going to spend. And it just kind of depends on what the rest of the division is doing. Again, the Cardinals aren't done, and they aren't going to shut the door on starting pitching. Just because it's not their focus right now doesn't mean it could be, maybe in January or early February. But the risk of waiting, as we all know, guys, and it's part of the reason why they didn't wait for Sonny Gray, is that the more you wait, the heavier you have to pay because you get a little bit more desperate, and teams capitalize on that. That's just the nature of the game. So I am encouraged by what the Cardinals have done early on. Do I think it's enough for them to be a legitimate postseason threat? Probably not. But do I think it's enough for them to contend for the division as is? Yes. Now, as fans totally have the right to be like, that's not what we want. We want to contend for an actual postseason, not just for the division, and I think that's very fair, and I think that's what the Cardinals front office is weighing next. Do they want to take these bold steps to get to that next level of competition, or do they want to stay status quo and contend for the division and hope that these moves work out?
Katie has a great piece, by the way. She mentioned the process that led to signing Sonny Gray. She has a great piece with John Mozeliak explaining step-by-step how they got to that place. And I'm not going to lie to you, it did make me a little bit nervous of what would have happened if they had been a little bit too late in that regard. But neither here nor there. They got him signed. That's all that matters at the end of the day. Katie Woo is our guest here on 101 ESPN. You can find her work over at The Athletic. And be sure you're following her on Twitter as well, at Katie J. Woo. If you're following her, that is where you could have seen that she reported the Cardinals had 2 pitchers in St. Louis last week. Katie, I'm going to have you take your reporter hat off for just a moment, if you don't mind, and put on your let's analyze what could happen the rest of the offseason. There have been reports. Dylan Cease is out there. There was a report last week, I believe from your colleague Ken Rosenthal over at The Athletic, that the Royals were at least in conversations with the Marlins about potentially trading Vinny Pasquantino for Jesus Luzardo. There is now a report that, hey, Framber Valdez might be out there available in the trade market. We'll see what ends up happening with the Astros and their money situation. If you're the Cardinals and any of those guys becomes available, if I put you in John Mozeliak's shoes, understanding that we'd be over budget and probably losing a lot as we would if any of us were in that job, would you be looking to acquire one of those 3 pitchers?
That's a great question. If I was running the St. Louis Cardinals, I think that they would have probably won like 5 games last year.
Sure, me too.
I think if I'm looking to improve via trade, the starting rotation, I'm looking at the Miami Marlins because this is an organization that there's a lot of overlap, obviously, with Skip Schumacher as the manager. There's a lot of familiarity between the 2 organizations, and that strong pitching core in Miami, I think, really exemplifies what the Cardinals should be targeting if they want to build a rotation with longevity. I mean, you look at the rotation for 2025, and it's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, and they're kind of almost in the same place if they don't pick up the options for Kyle Gibson and Lance Lynn. Yeah. Someone like a Jesus Luzardo is someone I would target. Now, Miami fans would probably hate that. He's a local guy. He's really come into his own in the last year or so there. But he has that high upside, young age, lots of control kind of pitcher that I would necessarily be targeting if I'm looking to extend the rotation in a way that was cost conservative. I like Framber Valdez. Obviously, he's a guy that can go out there and shove and immediately makes the rotation better. I think what the Astros are doing there is a little bit confusing. There's just a lot of teams, actually, that are very confused over what the money is going to look like because of their regional sports networks. But personally, if I was going to improve the rotation via trade, I would make sure that there were some untouchables. Obviously, Jordan Walker and Mason Wynn fit that mold. And I personally would hate to see a guy like Nolan Gorman and those 30-plus home runs from the left side go. I don't want to say he would be untouchable, but it would have to be a very big name for me to consider moving him. But I think I would target more of the Miami Marlins side than anything else, just because of their high upside and ample years of team control.
Katie, one report, I think it was last week, was Blake Snell could end up getting like a 3-year deal, not get the term, but higher AAV. Could you see the Cardinals potentially exploring that, or the idea of bringing in another pitcher via free agency, but maybe having to move money out?
I can't, just because they're so close to their targeted payroll, their self-induced payroll of $200 million. Which would that be a franchise record in opening day payroll? Yes. Would it probably be enough to alleviate most of fans' concerns? No. Both things can be true. They haven't been linked to Snell at all, and that dates back to even before the 2023 season ended. So I'm not quite sure if that name in particular fits this. And I also just can't see them spending in free agency for a starting pitcher when they still have to do that most likely for a reliever. Now, if they can go out and find a reliever that's effective and doesn't overblow the payroll, maybe that's something they consider. But I just think that would be out of their realm of again, self-induced spending. And I think they would be more likely to find an upgrade via trade. Also, when you're looking at the starting pitching market from a free agent perspective, there's just not a lot of guys that I think, minus the top ones that we all know of, that would really make or break this rotation. I think if the Cardinals really want to boost their rotation, if that's something they decide to do, the best way to do it would be through trade.
She is Katie Wu, and you can find her work over at The Athletic. It is excellent. It is well worth your time. It's worth the price of admission. By the way, she is a part of the Baseball Writers of America dinner, which will take place on January 14th at Max in St. Louis, at the Missouri Athletic Club, the MAC. If you want more information on that, 101ESPN.com is the place where you can go to find some of that. And Katie's been tweeting about that as well over on Twitter. If you just want to go over there, you can find it. So be sure to get your tickets now to the Baseball Writers of America dinner coming up on January 14th. You've got a chance to win those over at 101ESPN.com. Katie, we appreciate the time as always. Thanks so much for hopping on with us today. Happy holidays to you and the family. We'll talk with you again soon.
You got it, guys. Have a great one, and we'll talk soon.
That is Katie Wu, great insider for The Athletic, and occasionally here on 101 ESPN as well, joins us throughout the baseball season. T-Bone, she mentioned the Marlins and how the Cardinals could potentially match up with them. The pitcher that I think makes the most sense there, if we're just being totally honest, is Jesus Luzardo. At this point, I don't know that Edward Cabrera makes a ton of sense for the Cardinals. I like him. If they hadn't signed both Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson, I would have been into them trading for Edward Cabrera because of the stuff. And if it doesn't work out, fine. You basically are throwing numbers at the problem instead of having a internal solution that is clear and obvious, and Lynn and Gibson. At that point, you'd say, hey, Thompson, Matz, Liberator, Edward Cabrera, you guys are all fighting for the last couple of spots in the rotation, a potential spot or two in the bullpen, and then whoever loses out on this, you're going down to AAA to be a 6th or 7th starter down there. I don't think that's in the cards any longer. Is Jesus Luzardo a guy that you're willing to give a significant haul for?
I would consider it. I don't know if I would give up Gorman Foreman. I know he probably would have to be the centering piece around it, just because it's only been one season at this level of him pitching. And when I say one season, because he was good in 2022, but he didn't start 32 games and cover 178 and 2/3 innings. He's only done it the one time. I think he's got the stuff to where he can sustain that. But I would rather be trading for someone. If I'm going to give up a Nolan Gorman, I want to trade for someone that I know and have seen do it for longer than just 1 year. If you could center a package around like a Donovan and put some prospects around it, then I would consider it. But I don't know if I'd give up Gorman for Luzardo. I'd consider it, but I just don't think I would.
I might. I really might, man. He's got a legit fastball. Averages about 97 miles an hour. He's got swing and miss. Everything you're looking for, he pretty much has it in space. High strikeout rate, doesn't come with the walk rate issues that you see with like a Dylan Cease, for example. Has, I want to say it's like 4 years of club control remaining as well. Everything you want. He's pretty much got it. The stuff is there. And so he has the best of what you'd get out of Dylan Cease. He's got the control that you would get from some of these other young starters around the major league, specifically with Seattle that we were looking at. I think you can make a case that Jesus Luzardo is better than Logan Gilbert. Like just one for one, if you had the blind test and you just looked at their resumes and you didn't look at anything else and you took away the names, we talk about Logan Gilbert as if he's the superstar pitcher. I think Jesus Luzardo has better stuff and a higher upside than Logan Gilbert does. And it's had less longevity, but that also means less wear and tear on his arm so far. So if you're looking for a guy that you'd give up a significant haul for, Luzardo makes a ton of sense in that regard. It just probably requires you trading away the left-handed power that you've been craving for years from this lineup. And so it becomes a question of what's more important, getting that guy that projects to potentially be not just a number one starter for this upcoming season, but long-term, or the guy that brings that potential 40 home run power from the left side. Which one do you care about more? You need both, frankly, to win in the postseason. But which one helps you more? Which one are you missing more if you don't have it? I genuinely don't know the answer to it, and it's why it's such a difficult call if you're John Mozeliak. I think I'd make the move. I do. I think I would bring myself to a place of you just got to do it because you need that pitching so badly, and there's no other way to acquire it. I can find left-handed power. Not to the same degree as Nolan Gorman, but I can go out there and get Jock Peterson, for example, and bring him in if I really needed to go that route for legit left-handed power. I can't find this guy. If Jesus Luzardo was available in the free agency market, he'd be getting $25+ million a year, and the Cardinals would not be in that market. So I think I would do it.
I would much rather have the 40 home run power, I think, than the swing and miss from Luzardo. I just don't think you can develop power at that elite of a level, and I think that is rarer than a guy that has swing and miss. Now, to the effect of Luzardo, that kind of swing and miss, no, and you're probably right. They can't go out and sign that kind of guy.
And control.
Yeah. I don't think I would pull it off for Luzardo. Not because I don't think his stuff is good. Again, I've only seen the 1 year. I want to see more for a guy that you're going to be getting in a Gorman trade.
3 years of control remaining, arbitration year 2 this upcoming season. $5.9 million is the estimate. So you're talking about $6 million, $12 million, $20 million ish. That's what you're looking at over the next 3 years for Jesus Luzardo to be a part of your rotation. 26 years old right now. It'll be his age 26 season next year is what you're locking yourself into if you decided to make that kind of a move. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we're diving into the junk drawer. But next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out here on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with the SportsCenter update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Blues win in a thriller of a game this weekend, 4-3 in overtime over the Dallas Stars after being down 2-0 in the game. First time this season the Blues overcame a multi-goal deficit to come back and win. Blues now 2-0 under new interim head coach Drew Bannister. They look to improve to 3-0 tomorrow night as they'll be in Tampa Bay to take on the Lightning. Pregame will be at 5, puck drop at 6 here on your home for the Blues 101 ESPN. And then tonight, we've got some Monday Night Football for you. Seahawks and Eagles. Pregame coming up after the Fast Lane at 6:30. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
$314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out. You give us a scenario. We'll tell you if we are in or out here on BK and Ferrario. Let's start with this one, boys. In or out, you would have signed Tyler Glasnow to a 5-year extension worth $137 million if you were John Mozeliak at the Cardinals.
No, out. I would not have given him that deal. This is a guy that hasn't been healthy for a full season ever, I believe. So no chance I'd give him 5 years at $100+ million guaranteed. The Dodgers, it makes sense. They can just burn money.
Sure.
But for the Cardinals, no. No way would I do that. I'm out.
So, if you missed it over the weekend, it was made official that the Dodgers had traded Ryan Pepio and a center field prospect for them to the Tampa Bay Rays, and in return, they got Manuel Margot and Tyler Glasnow. And immediately upon the trade, they signed him to a 5-year deal worth $137 million, speaking of Tyler Glasnow. I also would not have given him that contract. I was all in on the Tyler Glasnow sweepstakes. I love the idea of a 1-year, $25 million deal for Glasnow to the Cardinals to help you fix the front end of your rotation. He comes with real risk in terms of the innings, but his upside is, his stuff is as good as anybody not named Jacob deGrom in Major League Baseball. For the Dodgers, like the deal. For the Cardinals, would have hated that contract because it limits so much of what they're able to do. $27 million a year, man, that is real money. And 5 years is legitimate term. So good for Tyler Glasnow. This is essentially the lesser version of the DeGrom contracts down in Texas. So I get why the Dodgers are doing this. They also just had serious problems in their rotation. They didn't have enough answers long term. I would not have done that, though, for the Cardinals. So I get why they decided to wait out this market, and the price goes up for Glasnow if you do have him on a longer term deal. So they gave up more than what I'm sure the Cardinals were or are willing to do for Glasnow, and then they ended up giving up more money long term than what the Cardinals should have done. T-Bone, what do you got for us?
In or out, Justin Fields will be the Chicago Bears quarterback next season.
Out. They will select a quarterback number 1 overall and will get a second-round pick in a trade for Justin Fields.
I
don't know who the head coach is going to be of this team next year, but I continue to think that the Falcons make a ton of sense for him.
That's who I thought too. I was thinking out. I saw a lot of stuff coming out of Chicago of, maybe Fields was could save his job with a good game against Cleveland, and then he laid an egg.
You know what would also be really fun is Pittsburgh. I don't know what their plans are. I think they probably just run it back with what's his face? Yeah, but I would love to see him there too.
Yeah, I'm out. I think you just have to select Caleb Williams. Even if you do believe that Justin Fields can be a franchise quarterback, I would say you trade him and have him be a franchise quarterback elsewhere. Atlanta was the number 1 spot for me. It just makes so much sense. A run-style offense, especially if you keep Arthur Smith, which they shouldn't. But if they do, he makes all the sense in the world to be traded to the Atlanta Falcons.
Do you think, though, that Chicago has enough weapons around Justin Fields to make an opinion enough on him to move on?
Their weapons are okay. Cole Kmet's like an average to above average NFL tight end.
DJ Moore's a good receiver.
DJ Moore is a legitimate, if not number 1, like he's one of the 20-ish best receivers in the NFL. So I think at this point you can start to evaluate him. And again, if he wasn't multiple years into his NFL career, if this was his rookie season, I think you run it back. But if you're the Bears, the opportunity cost is not selecting a quarterback number 1 overall and then having 5 cheap years of cost control. If you think that these quarterbacks stink, if you don't like Caleb Williams, you think the off-field personality is just not something you want to bring in, if you don't like Drake May, and you think, North Carolina quarterback, I've seen that. That's a dime a dozen. We've already done that with Mitchell Trubisky. Then go ahead. Keep Justin Fields, because I think there's a chance he ends up being a pretty good NFL quarterback. I'd be shocked, though, if he becomes a top 5 quarterback. And you're going to have to probably make the decision this offseason to re-sign him long-term. That's what you do at this time of a quarterback's career. So I wouldn't do it. I would make the trade. You've got the number 1 overall pick this offseason. Go ahead and add even more draft capital. Traded a second-round pick to get Montez Sweat, bring him in long-term. Go ahead and recoup a second-round pick potentially for Justin Fields. I think that's the direction that they decide to go, and frankly should decide to go. But that's what I would do.
All right, in or out, Jordan Kyrou finishes this season a plus. He's -4 right now.
I'm going to say in, because I think he's going to stick. I think the stated goal for the rest of the season is to keep Buchnevich, Thomas, and Kyrou on the same line. We'll see if their play will allow that to take place, but they appear to be highly motivated right now, and I think there's a very good chance that they end up sticking together for at least a while. And if they do, that line should be a plus when it's on the ice. If it's not, something's gone horribly awry. So I'll say in.
Yeah, I'll buy in too, because I agree with BK. They're going to probably keep that line together for the whole season now, just to see what they have in those guys. And Kyrou's been better defensively. I mean, we've talked about it. I know the fan base doesn't like to hear that, but he has been better defensively. And if that line starts to play like we saw against Dallas, and they can do that more consistently now that it looks like they've got some chemistry, they should finish all as a plus. So I will say I'm in on that. I think he will.
Yeah, and I've been saying this all along. I think he's going to find his goal-scoring touch again. Hopefully that time is now for him. And going off of what both of you said and adding that to it as well, I'm going to go in on that as well.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for in or out. We got this one from the 314. Guys, in or out, the Dodgers get too much credit for being a well-run organization. According to the 314, quote, they have a longer list of players they let go for little or no return than guys that have worked out for them. Imagine if the Cardinals traded Yordan Alvarez for a depth bullpen arm. Out. They have made the postseason, I think it's 11 straight years. Their rebuild year, said it at the beginning of the season, this was a rebuild, retool, whatever you want to label it as, for the Dodgers season, and they won 100 games. I think they get too much credit for knowing how to build for the postseason. I don't know that they've cracked that code. I don't know that anybody's cracked that code. I think the Phillies have better than just about anybody else if you want to label one team that has. Dodgers certainly in the American League, or excuse me, the Astros in the American League. But no, I think they get exactly the right amount of credit for being well-run. I think they're a really well-run organization.
Yeah, I'm out as well. I think they're very well-run, and I think some of their issues in the postseason is some injuries. Like this year, they were just so beat up and had off-field issues with Urias, and I think the previous year it was Bauer. Like they've tried to build that way with those top-end arms. They end up having off-field issues. It kills them. They deal with injuries, and for whatever reason, Kershaw just doesn't perform in the postseason. Like I think they've got the right idea. They've got a good bullpen usually. They've got a pretty good offense, but for whatever reason, the rotation just fails due to injuries or other things. But I'm out on that.
Well, and if your argument is, well, they just throw money at everything and solve their problems that way, that's fine. But the Mets do that too. The Padres did that too, and it didn't work out for them.
Like they did that with Mookie Betts. Freddie Freeman to a degree, but the Cardinals have the equivalent of that deal whenever they went out and got Paul Goldschmidt. Like, who's the other out? Obviously, this year is different with Shohei Ohtani, but prior to this offseason, we haven't seen what the results look like with him yet. They don't really go out and win bidding wars. That hasn't been their MO. Their MO has been making really shrewd decisions when it comes to trades and continuing to develop from within and then paying those guys whenever they get close to free agency. So as much as we talk about the Dodgers going out there and spending a ton of money, it was really at the very front end of this ownership group where they spent money to acquire prospects, to take on bad contracts, kind of like what the Braves are doing this offseason. And now they've been building like a $200+ million version of the Rays. That's really the equivalent of what they've been doing. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. Guys, Adam Ottavino, in or out, would be a good addition to the bullpen this offseason. I'm in. I think Adam Ottavino would be a really nice bullpen addition if he's not the number one guy you sign. If he's just a guy you're bringing in because they need a veteran player that takes the ball every opportunity that he can, and they want to add a little bit of leadership to that group, I'm all in. I think I have always liked Adam Ottavino, and he had a really good year once again last season. He's 38 years old, so he's getting up there in age, but I think he would be an excellent addition to this bullpen.
Yeah, I'd be in on it. I agree with you, though. He can't be the number one guy because I don't know if he's a back-end bullpen arm anymore in his career. Granted, I mean, last year, 3.21 ERA, 9 strikeouts per 9. Did have a bit of a walk issue last year, but he could probably fit that kind of Stratton role you're looking for, where he's mid-relief, but he's willing to take the ball a lot. I mean, just looking back at this, he's had 60-plus appearances, dating all the way back to 2017, outside the COVID year, of course. But since then, he's been able to go 60-plus games, and he did that in Colorado, New York, and both New York clubs. I'd say I'm in on that, as long as he's that second addition.
Coming up next, let's dive into the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grain Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Guys, I've got a couple of stories that I want to get to today for the junk drawer, both of which include test taking as the main subject line. So the first one, the headline is as follows. At least 100 students in Connecticut are being forced to retake their SATs after they were, quote, mistakenly given the wrong test. According to the story, 114 students who took the test on December 2nd were using a test that was supposed to be used in October of 2021. They will instead have to retake the exam in preparations for their college admissions.
Oh, brutal.
Can you imagine? The SATs are already, as is, an excruciating experience where it takes hours to finish this test. For a lot of people, you put in hours upon hours of preparation for these exams for one test to be able to get it done. And a lot of people have testing anxieties where it really wears and tears on you, and then you wait months to be able to find out what your actual score was on it. Can you imagine if you take the exam and then 2 weeks later it comes out, whoops, sorry guys, we messed up. Nothing that you just did will count for anything.
Oh, God. Look, I'm not saying it would be understandable, but if it was like the previous year's test, like 2022, like that, it would be like, okay, I could see how that happened. I'm still ticked, don't get me wrong. 2021, how is that possible? How is that possible that they messed up with that SAT? I took the SAT twice. Once because he had to do it. Second time because, well, I needed to do it. And I didn't want to do it, but I needed to do it. I hated every single second of it. So if that's the case, maybe I'm asking for too much here. They should grade that one. Allow them to take this. They have to take the second one and allow them to take the best score. That's what I'm saying.
So, here's what I'll say. I will say this, like, I would be pissed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I will say, as someone I took the ACT 3 times, and I increased for 5 points from the first time to the third time. So I would assume that they're going to give the test out again for free. I would assume, because you pay for those.
They messed up, yeah.
So you do get a little bit of extra experience, and you can use it as strategy for the next one. It is helpful, but no, I'd still be pissed.
I prepared a lot for the second time I took the SAT, because I'm not gonna lie, didn't do really that much preparing for the first go around. It still didn't help me all that much. I don't know. The test, you know me, I'm not good with the English language. You give me that English part, oh man, that was brutal.
Yeah, there really got him. And you got to 2, 2, and 2. Whoa, no chance.
And I got to learn about adverbs and everything.
They were given 3 days heads up.
That's it?
They got the heads up about, I think it was last Wednesday, that they would potentially have to take the test on Saturday. For a lot of the kids, they were like, that's not enough time.
And on a weekend?
I can't.
Oh, that's
they
brutal.
always give them on weekends. It's always a Saturday or I think it's always Saturday.
Like when we took the SAT, we took it on a weekday.
Mine was the weekend.
Yeah, we always did it on
really?
weekends.
I'm pretty sure mine. Like I did when I took
did it during the school day.
Yeah, our school did it that way.
Yeah, we never did it that way.
I do.
We didn't even have the option.
See, weekend was what I did for the second go round, but I had to travel somewhere else to take it. For our school, we did it as a school day. Like it was a Friday or something.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, we did not do that. We did it on the weekend, and then they said that the next available date, if they don't want to do it for this past weekend, is in March. And that's a digital version of the test that they're unfamiliar with. And it's a 3-week delay for any of the student athletes that are trying to graduate at semester and just needed to take a test to be eligible. First of all, they waited too long. That's on them. But yeah, it's not ideal, to say the least.
So I'm upset for them.
And the other thing, California kid, 17 years old, passed the bar exam this past weekend. He's been sworn in as an attorney.
I saw that. That was impressive.
Are you guys hiring a 17-year-old to represent you in any circumstance?
Sure.
Nope.
He's got to be really smart. I'd do it.
I know it's ageist. I don't care. I'm not hiring a 17-year-old kid to represent me, especially if it's a big case. Not doing it. He's got to be brilliant. But I need somebody that's going to represent me and then connect with that group of however many people that's part of the jury. No siree. You are not representing me at 17 years old. They're going to look at you and say, that guy's underqualified.
I'd have that guy for like a speeding ticket. That's what I'd do.
Yeah, for sure.
Now that you mention it, I don't know how I'd feel if it was a case where he has to sway a jury, because he definitely would not be respected by the jury. So, you know what? I'd change my answer. I would not be represented by him.
Coming up in 15 minutes, Craig Berube, the former Blues head coach, Stanley Cup champion, will join the show. Be sure to tell all your friends. 1:15, Craig Berube will join us here on BK and Ferrario. But coming up next, guys, Robert Thomas is giving us reason to believe that this contract might be a net positive for the Blues. We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN.
Tomer, for me, looking, in the future, like there's a good possibility, you could see a star one day. He has the ability to be a star. Now, whether he gets there or not, that's a lot has to do with him and certain things that go into it. But he definitely has the brains and the ability to be one.
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in less than 10 minutes, we'll talk to that voice you just heard, the former coach of the Blues, Stanley Cup champion Craig Berube. He said that with us a couple of years ago here on the show, T-Bone, saying that Robert Thomas has a chance to be a star for the St. Louis Blues. We're starting to see that. So far this season, Robert Thomas has 12 goals, 20 assists, 32 points in his first 30 games. He's also a plus 11 on the ice. I've been saying, I was a little underwhelmed with Robert Thomas early on this season, and I felt like that was true. I no longer can say that, guys. Robert Thomas, for the last month, maybe 6 weeks, has been the Blues' best player, and I'm not sure there's an argument otherwise. The guy has been pretty damn good in every area of his game. He's on the PK, he's distributing, he's scoring goals, he's putting shots on net regularly. He's now on pace for 185 shots on goal this season, which is insane for a guy that never wanted to shoot it. He's now on pace this season for 33 goals, 55 assists, 87 points, and a plus 30 this season. That is his current pace. Let me put that in context for you, T-Bone. Guys that have finished their regular season at the age of 25 or younger, which Robert Thomas is right now, with at least 30 goals and 85 or more points and a plus-minus as good as Robert Thomas is on pace for right now. 30 goals, 85 points, 30 plus-minus. Jason Robertson, Austin Matthews, Matthew Tkachuk, Mikko Rantanen, Alex Ovechkin, Nicholas Backstrom, Zach Parise. It's the entire list of guys that have done that in the last 15 years. Now, he's got to continue at this exact pace. He's got to play this way for the entirety of the season and not a third of the season. But so far, we are seeing what Craig Berube said Robert Thomas had the potential to be, and we're seeing it all come to fruition in a way that is really impressive, man. His 200-foot game is really starting to come together.
Yeah, 200-foot games come together, and I think the most impressive part is now that he's shooting the puck, because we kept saying it last year. He does have a really good shot. He just doesn't shoot it. You said he's on pace for 185 shots on goal. To give you an idea, he was at 106 shots on goal last year in 73 games. And he's already halfway to that mark in 30 games played this year. So the fact that he's playing a better 200-foot game, he's been great on the face-off dot so far this year, winning 54% of his draws. And you mentioned the offense as well, and the Blues are now trying him as the one-timer on the power play as well. If he's an 80-point guy, that's what'd you say he was on pace for? 88 points or something like that? Yeah. That's the star that the Blues have been looking for. They've been looking for somebody to get into that 85-point kind of plateau, because that is where the superstars lie, is in that 85 to 100-plus point category. And he's definitely showing that he's on that mark. And to me, the biggest step for him has been the goal-scoring ability, willing to shoot the puck now, because he's shooting right around his shooting percentage last year. And the reason he's on pace for more goals is because he's just willing to let the puck fly now.
Grant, the guy that I've always compared him to is Sebastian Aho, and I know they're not all that similar in terms of the age. Like, Sebastian Aho is not some 35-year-old player that's been doing this for a decade, but it came to him quicker, and he's been on a team that's had a lot of success. And he's a guy that, like, early on in his career, he didn't have a ton of goal production. It was good, but it wasn't a crazy number. He's just been a consistent, like, 70 to 80-point player, and he's consistently putting up 30 goals. And lately, he's become more of a goal scorer, 30-plus every year in the last few seasons. I think we're starting to see Robert Thomas become that kind of a player as well, but potentially with more passing ability. Like, that is one hell of a player to be able to build around. And if he continues with this, man, now we're starting to see a player that is worth way more than the $8 million contracts that the Blues are spending on him.
I like that comp, too, to Sebastian Aho. I think Aho's obviously a little bit more well-seasoned, and he's better defensively, but Thomas also is a lot younger than him. And I'll give you some more numbers, BK, because I know that'll get you going over there a little bit. If you look at scoring chances for...
to me, man.
Gosh, get a room.
I was going to go to the power play, T-Bone. You mentioned it, because that's an area that if the power play gets going, that's going to boost Thomas's numbers even more. So I got to thinking about this last game, actually, because with the power play being so sluggish this season, how does Robert Thomas stack up in the NHL amongst centers at 5-on-5? He's top 10 in the NHL in scoring chances for this season. He is better than Mark Scheifele, Brock Nelson, Austin Matthews, Matt Barzal, John Tavares, Leon Draisaitl. These are players that he's generated more scoring chances for than this season. And so we've had the conversation multiple times earlier this year of, can Robert Thomas be a number one center for you moving forward? And I think this season so far, he's answering that he can be. Now, the one downfall of Robert Thomas so far, and this goes to what we were talking about when it comes to Sebastian Aho being better defensively. On the ice, he's had 205 scoring chances against. So the other team is generating some offense too. He's got a scoring chance for percentage of 54.24%. A lot of these players, their percentage is better.
Sure.
But again, this is a young player that's still developing. We've seen him take a big step this season, like Jordan Kyrou defensively. What can he do moving forward? I think there's a lot of promise in that.
That is Grant Francis. He's Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, we're going to be joined by the Chief. Craig Berube, former Blues head coach and Stanley Cup champion, joins the show coming up next. Be sure to tell your friends here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. We've got Grant Francis running the board for us today. We're hoping to be joined by former Blues head coach Craig Berube here in just a little bit, so we'll let you know when we get connected with him. I want to talk to him about what the change in veteran leadership meant for the Blues and for him as the head coach for the St. Louis Blues, what the biggest hurdles were to overcome as you try to do this transition in a retool era for the St. Louis Blues. And then we just had a conversation about Robert Thomas as well. I recalled a few years ago, Berube was on with, I think it was Rivs and BK at the time. It was me and Jamie, and we're talking to Berube during the offseason. And he said, hey, Robert Thomas, I believe, is going to be a star. He has that kind of potential if he works at it and he continues working on his craft. So want to get into that with Craig Berube here in just a little bit. But T-Bone, one of the things that I wanted to open with Berube is I can't think of many sports figures here in St. Louis that became more beloved. And I'm talking athlete, coach, executive, whatever. And I'm curious, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. I want to hear from our listeners on this. Who are the guys that are on that level? Like team photo, Mount Rushmore, whatever. But guys that you believe are as beloved in like the last 20 years or so as what Craig Berube became here in St. Louis. Who else would be on that level in your mind?
Well, I think 20 years, I can't
our era of watching
I can't think of
St. Louis sports.
Another coach that would fall into that. TLR would. I think Tony La Russa would fall into that. But outside of that, that's the only coach / executive. Walt Jocketty maybe falls into that as an executive. Those are probably the only two that I could think of, though.
And that's why you saw the backlash that we did over the last week or so. And it sounds like we've got Craig Berube, the former Blues head coach and Stanley Cup champion, on the line. He's joining us via the 101 ESPN hotline. And Craig, that's where I want to begin with you, if you don't mind. I genuinely cannot think of many St. Louis sports figures that were as beloved here within this St. Louis sports community as you became here as the Blues head coach. Did you feel that as you were the head coach here in St. Louis? And if so, what did that mean to you?
Well, I mean, I think it means everything. I think, I can't say enough about the fans and the people here in St. Louis, how they treated me and supported me throughout my time here. That's the toughest part, I think, is, leaving that situation, the people that you met and became friends with, and the fan base, how they treated me was excellent. I can't say enough.
As you sit back now and reflect, Craig, and I don't know how much time you've had to do this yet, but what are some of the flashpoints that come to mind immediately for you? I would have to imagine that Stanley Cup run is front and center in that regard, but what are some of the other things that you're going to take from your experience and you're going to remember as fondly as you will?
Well, I think just working with all the people you work with, when I was here 7 years, and with working with mostly same training staff, a lot of the same coaches, a lot of the same players. I know some players have moved on, but I think, I worked with a lot of good people here, and I was very fortunate to work in a special place. I really believe it's a special place here in St. Louis, not only the fans and the people, but the organization and the people that I got to work with. I'll miss that. I really will. Thank you to all the people that have helped me, the players, coaches, trainers. They're great to me.
And Craig, you mentioned a lot of the players that you worked with, especially early on, the ones that were a part of that cup, have kind of moved on here. I am curious, how much do you think that change, especially in the veteran leadership that we've seen over the last few years, has played into what was ultimately the inconsistency that we saw on the ice?
Yeah, I mean, I think you go through different stages when you're here this long, and it doesn't always happen that way. But, I mean, there were some changes here and significant ones over the years. So you got new people that have to come in and put in place, and hopefully they do the job. And, things have changed over time, and it is what it is. I would have liked to stayed on and kept working with this group of guys and see where we got to. But like I said, changes are made, and, you just deal with it and move on.
Craig, how difficult is it we mentioned bringing in new guys, to thread that needle and develop young players here at the NHL while also with the expectations of trying to win?
It's tough. I don't know if you could do both. I mean, it's a hard thing to do. I mean, I think that we've developed some players here over time, and still at the same time we're in the winning business. But it's a hard thing to manage, to be honest with you. And I think we're at this year we're trying to develop some younger players on the back end and a couple up front. But at the same time, we're trying to get some real chemistry built with the whole team at the same time, and to be able to win hockey games. It's a hard thing to do. Now it is doable, I believe, but it takes time.
Craig, last week we talked with Mike Rupp, the former Stanley Cup champion as well, the forward for the Devils, and he brought up how difficult it is to get young players to be accepting of roles, especially on third and fourth line as they're continuing to develop early in their career in the NHL, and how that's been something that's kind of changed over the years. 20 years ago, you get an opportunity in the NHL and you take whatever role the coach is willing to give you. Have you seen that as well? And if so, how difficult of a process is that of trying to get guys to accept those lesser roles so that way eventually they can become, top line player, second line player, et cetera?
Yeah, it's not always an easy thing. I think some players are more accepting than others. If you take Robert Thomas, came here as a young 18-year-old, I think, or 19 at the time. He was put in a role starting on the fourth line, and it worked out. I mean, he's a top-line player now and playing some real good hockey at a high level. But not everybody's the same, and there's always guys that aren't as accepting and want more and want to be put in key situations. And I think that's difficult at times, too, is when you're trying to develop these young guys and you kind of have to put them in some key situations and develop them, and they're not ready to really take on those roles full time, and it might cost you some hockey games on the way. That's really the reality of it.
Well, Craig, you mentioned Robert Thomas and him starting as a fourth liner, now being up on that top line. Did you see him taking the steps and showing that star potential this season?
Yeah, for sure. I think he did some good things this summer and with his training, and I still think that there's more there with Robert. He's a very talented person. Really can see the ice well and make plays, and now he's taken on scoring a little bit more and taking pride in shooting the puck and scoring some goals. He's got a lot of potential still. Like, this guy's a good player. But I saw this coming. I knew that he'd be, at some point turning into a number one center.
Craig Berube is our guest for another few minutes here on 101 ESPN. We hugely appreciate him giving us the time today. Former Blues head coach, Stanley Cup champion is certainly what he's going to be remembered for most here with the Blues. Craig, we talked to Bruce Boudreau on Friday as well about what it's like to be a head coach in this spot, and where the message after a few years, we've seen this around the league. Bruce Boudreau mentioned it. Hey, the 3 different stints. He had 4 years in, and then for whatever reason, his message stopped resonating with the team. As a coach in the NHL, why do you think that takes place? Why do we see there seems to be almost like an hourglass that stops for coaches where the message stops resonating? Do you have a finger on why that might be?
Oh, I wish I did, but I mean, it's a good question. It's hard. Like, I think that, you're a coach and you do things a certain way, and when you have success doing them a certain way, it's hard to change. And I do believe you got to make some adjustments along the way to last a little bit longer than maybe you're expected, or that coaches are, their expectancy. It's 3-4 years and they're out, right? So, I mean, I think you got to adjust a little bit at times and make some adjustments along the way with how you approach things. And leadership's really important in this situation. If you have real strong leadership, a coach can last a lot longer. 100%, I believe that, because they know what's best for the team, the leaders. And if they've done something in a certain way with a coach and you've had success and you won, well, they're gonna do that over time because they know it works, and they're going to try to get everybody to do what works. But I think you lose, when you lose some leaders, you lose some good people, things change. The message can get old with a lot of people and young guys. They might not want to hear it anymore, and maybe they don't like what we're trying to do. It's tough to say. I think every situation is a little bit different.
Craig, when you think about the lessons that you learned in Philadelphia, you implemented a lot of those here in St. Louis. I remember that was a lot of the talk early on in your tenure going towards that run to the Cup in 2019. What do you think you learned about yourself as a coach over the last few years, or just overall in your time here in St. Louis? Were there lessons that you're going to take from this tenure as well?
I think you're always in the learning process as a coach and trying to get better as a coach. And, I think that's big part of coaching and moving forward. There's a lot of great things that we accomplished here and did here. I think the consistency part, if you want to be a consistent team, and as a coach, I think you really got to push, the same things day in and day out, and you got to preach the same message day in and day out. Don't change, that changing things isn't going to help. You got to just keep pounding away at the same message and get it through to everybody and keep doing it. And that's important. And, I think, holding players accountable with ice time is very important too, because that's really the only control you have as a coach. And you got to put them in there. You got to put people in position. If they deserve to play, then they play, and if they're not deserving of playing, then you probably don't put them out there as much, in situations. And I think that's a big part of coaching. I really do.
Craig, just two more questions for you, and thanks so much once again for joining us here on BK and Ferrario. Craig Berube, former Blues head coach and Stanley Cup champion, joining us here on the show. I saw your comments elsewhere, speaking with Jeremy Rutherford about the Jordan Kyrou comment that went everywhere and ended up with him being booed at the game against the Senators. Over the weekend, he had an outstanding game against Dallas, responded really well. The fans, of course, embraced him at the arena as well. I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on seeing Kyrou bounce back and perform that way on Saturday against Dallas.
Yeah, it's good for him. I'm happy for him. You don't want to see that happen to a young player like that. I mean, I know he's not that young, but he's still young. And, he had a good game against Dallas, which is good. And he's just got to keep pushing forward here with his development as a player. And, really it's just about him competing on a nightly basis and using his talents to the best he can. But, he will become a better and better player as he grows up a little bit and becomes more competitive as a player, because he has the tools. There's no doubt about it. And sometimes that competitiveness is not there. But listen, I was happy for Jordan to come out and perform at a high level after a tough night the night before.
Craig, we'll get you out of here on this. We're getting a ton of texts on the text line right now, basically all of them saying something to the degree of make sure that you let Craig Berube know how much we appreciate his time here in St. Louis. I am curious, you're talking to a lot of Blues fans right now on your home of the Blues 101 ESPN. How do you hope that they remember your time in St. Louis? If you could speak to them right now, what would you hope that they remember? How much I'm going to miss St. Louis and the fan base and the people. They really made me feel at home here. I really enjoyed my time here as a coach. The way this town and our team looks at how they are. We're a blue collar city, a blue collar team, and it just fits well with me. And we won a cup here and did a lot of great things, and it's something that I'll never forget. I mean, you can't forget it, right? It's impossible. So we accomplished something here that was unreal, and I'll remember that forever. Craig, we appreciate the time, man. I'm going to miss hearing you on the Fast Lane weekly. We're going to certainly miss seeing you behind the bench here in St. Louis, but we wish you nothing but the best moving forward. Can't wait to see what's next for you. And we wish your Baltimore Ravens nothing but the best of luck whenever they're not playing my Kansas City Chiefs.
They're looking good right now, boys. 4 in a row.
They looked good last night, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Craig, appreciate the time, man.
Guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's Craig Berube, former Blues head coach, Stanley Cup champion here on 101 ESPN. You are not going to find anybody with more class than that. That's not an easy thing to do. It's a tough spot to be in, but full disclosure, last night we had Alex reach out to Berube to find out, hey, would you be willing or interested in coming on the show? Blues fans would love to hear from you. We think it'd be good for you, for the fans to have a little bit of closure. Like, I think it would be good for everybody. And Berube's initial response was, you know what? He talked to Jeremy Rutherford. He talked with another station in town. I think Blues fans have heard enough from me. I probably best to just kind of move forward, right? Let them go their separate ways. It's Drew Bannister's team now. Like, they can go in that direction. And then he responded back. He's like, you know what? I'll go ahead and do it. I'm happy to hop on with you guys tomorrow. Let's find a time that'll work for both of us. Credit to him for doing that, man. That's awesome. And that is why fans, he resonates with them so much. Obviously, the cup is the biggest thing, right? He won. He brought you the thing that no other coach has ever been able to do. You've got Hall of Famers that have coached here in St. Louis. None of them accomplished what Craig Berube did. And so for that reason and that reason alone, he was always going to be a legend. But then you add in what he talks about there at the end with his blue-collar mentality and how that resonates here in St. Louis, him coming on the air, taking the high road with the Jordan Kyrou situation. Like, all of that is just who Craig Berube is, man. And so credit to him. He is going to be missed in the community. Forget the sports side of things. Just a good dude. Loved hearing him on the Fast Lane regularly as well. But huge thanks to him for doing that, because he absolutely did not have to, but it speaks to who he is as a person that he was willing and able to. Yeah, big shout out to Craig Berube, because that is a tough thing to do, to hop on and talk with a bunch of people not even a week removed from when he was relieved of his duties as the head coach. And I thought he had great answers in there as well, and talking about what it's like to try and coach guys up at the NHL level while also trying to balance that winning. Winning is what is going to keep a head coach's job, and it's tough to do. It's tough to try and develop guys at the NHL level. And I liked what he said about Jordan Kyrou's bounce back game, and saying that he really needed that, and that he's got all the tools in the world to make this thing work. And same with Robert Thomas. He also didn't pull punches, though. I will appreciate that about Berube too. I found it very. If you listen to his answer, he gave you insight into how he views Jordan Kyrou. He said all the skill in the world. He's just got to compete. When he competes, you see games like that. So credit to Berube for being honest in that answer as well. Took the high road, but still the coach through and through. Yeah, definitely had that one. And look, when he said that, it perked my ears up a little bit. And look, it made sense, because Doug Armstrong mentioned, the competitiveness with the team. And who was a guy that just happened to have that happen in the Red Wings game that was right before Craig Berube lost his job? It was Kyrou losing a board battle. And you're right. I'm glad to see that he decided not to pull punches and did say, you know what, he has every skill that you need. But yes, he does need to get more competitive. And as we saw in the game Saturday, when he is out there and he is throwing that compete, he is a great hockey player. An elite one. And it is just a matter of putting it all together, as was the goal going into this season for Craig Berube.
Yeah, and that's been something, too, that he's done throughout his whole tenure here. Whether it be at media press conferences after practices or after games, he always gives those honest answers. He always gives good answers. I can't remember a time that Craig Berube was asked a question, good or bad, and he didn't give a fair and honest answer. A lot of coaches around the league aren't like that. A lot of coaches will give you fluff. They'll tell you what you want to hear, and Craig Berube's just not like that. And that on top of everything else we've talked about, he's just a phenomenal human being through and through, and one of the best coaches, if not the best coach in Blues history. Once again, shout out to Craig Berube for taking the time to do that. That is not an easy spot to be in, and I don't envy it. And I hope you guys appreciate what he was willing to do there, the candor that he was willing to give, the fact that he was even willing to come on to talk to you guys. That's really why he does it. It's because he clearly has a connection with this fan base in a way that
man, again, going back to where we started this segment, I don't think there's many coaches in any market, in any sport, that have the connection with their fans the way that Berube was able to build over the course of 6 seasons here in St. Louis. That is incredibly rare. So kudos to him for being willing to do that. If you missed any of our conversation with Craig Berube, the former Blues head coach, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. The free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. You can also find it on YouTube at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. It is all brought to you by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. For Tanner and Grant, I'm BK. Coming up next, are we watching an all-time great team right before our eyes? And if so, why aren't we recognizing it? We'll talk about it next here on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. First time this season, the Blues take down a team after being down 2 goals in a game. That was this Saturday when they beat the Stars 4-3 in overtime. They went down 2 goals in the first, came back and took a 3-2 lead before winning after the Stars tied it in overtime. Colton Parayko, his 5th of the year, was the game winner. Blues will be back in action looking to improve to 3-0 under Drew Bannister tomorrow night as they're in Tampa Bay to take on the Lightning. 5 o'clock pregame, 6 o'clock puck drop here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. And then tonight, we've got Seahawks and Eagles, some Monday Night Football coming at you after the Fast Lane pregame for that one starting at 6:30. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff. Find new roads and shop 24/7 at londoff.com and londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
Firing together. McCaffrey gets a breather. Mason is in. Wide open. Purdy to Samuel. Walk in. Touchdown. San Francisco.
That's what it sounded like yesterday as the San Francisco 49ers do what they do, which is just absolutely destroy the opposition. The 49ers are very clearly the best team in the NFL this year, T-Bone. And alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Brandon Kiley. They might be an all-time great team. And I know that sounds weird to hear when you're thinking about, okay, BK, Brock Purdy, really? That's the guy that's leading one of the best teams that you've seen in recent memory?
Mr. Irrelevant.
The answer might be yes. They are a plus 191 in point differential so far this year. And they are not like the Cowboys in that they just do it against the bad teams that are on their schedule. No. They have so far beaten this year the Dallas Cowboys 42-10. They beat the Philadelphia Eagles 42-19. They did that, by the way, on the road. They went on the road in Seattle, a very difficult place to play, and beat the Seahawks 31-13. We're going to see them next Monday night at home against Baltimore, another quality team on their schedule. My guess, they're going to win that one by multiple scores as well because they are better than the Baltimore Ravens are right now. T-Bone, they have the NFL's leading rusher. They have the second leader in passing yards. They have guys that are 3 of them in the top 30 in the NFL in receiving yards this year. And that's not to mention the defense, which right now is ranked 2nd in the NFL in points per game, and they have the best turnover margin in the NFL as well. This team in 2023 has scored more touchdowns than they have punts on the season. Let me say that one more time. They have more drives this year that have ended in touchdowns than punts. So why aren't we viewing them as a potential all-time great team, T-Bone? Is it as simple as because Brock Purdy's their quarterback?
I think it is. I think it is as simple as Brock Purdy because they've got elite weapons around him. The defense has elite weapons. And I think the one thing that holds them back in terms of the view from fans is Brock Purdy because he was Mr. Irrelevant. He doesn't have the high pedigree draft status, which will stick with a player forever. And I think some of that is fair because I brought this up. Look, they lost 3 in a row this season at Cleveland, at Minnesota versus Cincinnati. And in my opinion, Purdy did not show that he was a difference maker when they were dealing with injuries.
Yeah.
When Williams was out, when Debo was out, they lost one of those games. I think it was a Minnesota game where Purdy had a chance to drive them down the field and he throws a pick. And I thought at the time, I was like, okay, he's not a difference maker, but this offense is so good around him that he can just be the game manager and put up gaudy numbers and be the guy that can lead them to the promised land and lead them to the Super Bowl.
So I think there's some truth to that. I also saw some difference-making type of plays yesterday, though. Like, when I watch Brock Purdy, if you just strip away the name and strip away the draft pedigree, you would think that guy was a first-round draft pick. Like, some of the stuff he does on the field, he goes about it a little differently. It doesn't look as aesthetically pleasing as, like, watching a Lamar Jackson or a Patrick Mahomes. But he does some of the things that Mahomes does, where he's scrambling around and then suddenly finds a guy, and the players are running wide open because he also has skilled and gifted pass catchers around him. But I didn't tear down Patrick Mahomes because he had Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill and Sammy Watkins around him. He at one point had Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, and prime version of Kareem Hunt as his weapons, and a really great offensive line. He won the MVP that year because he was special. Brock Purdy's not Patrick Mahomes. I'm not trying to suggest that he is, but I think Brock Purdy's probably going to win the MVP this year, and I think he's going to be deserving of winning the MVP this year because without him, this is not the same team. We saw this basically collection of pass catchers around him with Jimmy Garoppolo. It didn't feel the same. That was a team that won because of their defense, and they had an offense that was also pretty good. This offense is why they're winning a lot of these games. Good defense, don't get me wrong, but this offense is special. It is up there with the Chiefs teams that I watched, with maybe not to the same degree, but maybe the 07 Patriots, the greatest show on turf. Like, these are the offensive teams that this version of the 49ers is going to be compared to when all is said and done because of what they are accomplishing on the field right now.
Yeah, and look, maybe I'll change my opinion of Brock Purdy and him being a game changer is if he does something in the playoffs, like he has to lead them down the field 80 yards in the 2-minute drill to go win a football game. Then maybe the opinion of me changes. But I don't know. When they dealt with the injuries, and maybe it just stands out for me because I don't know why, but when they dealt with the injuries, I did not feel like Brock Purdy was the guy that could lead you down the football field if needed to win a football game. And look, maybe if you pluck out a piece, like maybe they deal with an injury in the playoffs, or they make some kind of move, somebody walks away at some point in his time with San Francisco, and then he continues to perform well. Mahomes didn't really lose any of those pieces.
The thing is, though, I don't think it's about that. Like, I think long term, I've got questions about Brock Purdy, too. Like, I do. I don't know that he's the top 5 quarterback in the NFL right now. I'd probably say he's not. But the context of the situation matters. And in 2023, he's not paid yet. He's still a really cheap player, so they can keep these guys around him. So this version of Brock Purdy, with this version of their offense and that play caller and Kyle Shanahan, who I still think is one of the 3 best in the NFL, like this version of that offense is as good as you're going to see in the NFL, in part because he's cheap. Like, you're not going to be able to keep Debo and Ayuk and Christian McCaffrey and that defense around him and the offensive line around him whenever he gets expensive. That's going to happen sooner rather than later. But right now, it's not. So we can have the long-term conversations about Brock Purdy. I'm more than happy to have those, and I think there will come a point in time where he does. I think he's going to settle into more of a Dak Prescott type of quarterback than Patrick Mahomes. But for right now, with this version of the offense, what's assembled around him, he's special. He's having a special season.
Yeah, not only special season. I mean, I agree with everything you said about them being potentially one of the great teams all time in terms of the way that they're putting up numbers and all that. They are clearly the best team in the NFL. There's no close second. There's nobody else. I know they had that 3-game losing streak that I keep bringing up, but that was explainable. They dealt with injuries. When they are healthy, they cannot be stopped. I don't think there's a team that can compete with them right now on a football field. I think they're going to coast through the NFC, and then we'll see what happens when they get to the Super Bowl.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. That's Grant Francis. I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, we'll hit the BK and Ferrario Rewind here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Tanner and Grant, I'm BK, hoping to have Alex Ferrario back in the saddle tomorrow. He missed today. He was feeling a little bit under the weather. If you guys missed any of the show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. The free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. We're able to catch up with Cardinals insider Katie Woo, who gave us an update on where things stand for the Cardinals with their quest to get another reliever or two, and whether or not the Cardinals are still in on the pitching trade market, the starting pitching trade market. So be sure to check that out. Also, we're able to catch up with former Blues head coach, Stanley Cup champion Craig Berube as well. All of that available for you right now on the podcast page. There's still time for you to get 101 ESPN merch to support Operation Food Search this December. We've partnered with STL Shirt Company to offer some 101 ESPN merch online. T-shirts, hoodies, hats, so much more. A bunch of your favorites are all available for you over at 101ESPN.com. It is powered by McBride Homes. We went along with Berube, so we don't have a ton of time left for T-Bone and Grant, who did a fantastic job filling in on short notice today. I'm BK. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. The Fast Lane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.